Alright, so I'll call to order the regular Town of Nantucket Board of Appeals meeting for Thursday, August 8th, 2019. Can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Is everybody's microphone on?
Nope. So we have the minutes of June 13th, 2019, and July 11th, 2019. Did anyone have any issues with those? I read them, I did not. Anyone want to vote to approve those minutes?
I didn't read them. I didn't either.
Okay, well, do we want to just do the July 11th ones then? Because that was just,
That was no meeting, basically.
there was really no meeting. It was just a request to continue.
Yeah.
And it was Toole, McCarthy, Botticelli, O'Meara, and Thayer. There really was no there was no board real comment either, so I think we could at least approve those and get those out of the way.
Okay.
Okay, so someone want to make that motion?
I'll make it.
And second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the July 11th are approved, and we'll revisit June 13th next month. Okay.
Please do read them out, because it's getting, you don't want to go 3 months without.
And it wasn't like very heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So can we start? Do we need to, you want to wait for Jim and?
Let me just text James.
Yeah, because you'll need Jim on the first two, because I have to sit down.
Okay. Even on the
Take care of
withdraw,
something.
even on the request to withdraw?
No.
Why don't we at least do the request to withdraw?
Is Carol coming?
Oh, I forgot about Karen.
You happy to be sitting over on the left side?
I tried to sit there, but Eleanor was quickly shoved me down the table. All right, well, why don't we do the request to withdraw?
Sure.
So, old business, application 51-03, Rugged Scott LLC, is a request to withdraw without prejudice. Anyone have any comment on that? No. Okay, so someone want to make that motion?
Sure. I'll make the motion.
Someone second?
Second.
Okay, so Jeff seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on. All right, so Lisa, you're off the first two.
So bad. So we'll have to skip. Unless this happens to be.
We can skip the first two and come back to them.
Do we know if Karen's coming? Right?
I mean, maybe they're just stuck in traffic. I kind of looped way around to avoid it. It is really bad. If
1919?
yeah, I mean, if everyone's okay, we could just move to 1919.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to.
Okay. So
Can you wait 1 second?
Sure.
I want to make sure I'm getting my own minutes. Just 1 second.
okay.
All right, have you already voted on the first matter?
We did the request to withdraw without prejudice.
Okay, can you tell me who voted on that, please?
I did.
Let's say so. Ed, Lisa, Susan, Michael, and Jeff.
Who made the motion?
Are you here for the
I
request?
think Lisa made the motion and Jeff seconded.
Okay, so
Sorry about that.
Maybe you just walk in.
Ed, Susan, Lisa, Michael. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay, so application 1919, Sheila Giardini and Carmine Giardini, 7 Clifford Street, represented by Cohen. Are you prepared to go now? Is that okay?
Sure. Only I'd rather do 1819 first.
I thought the first two. Did I miss one?
No, I think you're right.
I thought 17 and 18 Lisa and Ed were conflicted out of.
Yeah.
So we're waiting for a full board.
So we don't. We
wait,
only want
so
2,
you only have
3,
4 people.
Yeah, you're right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
They're on their way back.
Okay. So let's just start this one and we can
Sure.
circle back.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
I didn't catch that part. So who's the board? I see 6 people, so.
We don't, you don't.
We don't have to determine,
You don't have to
we'll
determine,
we'll
okay.
just figure it out when we vote.
Okay, that's fine. So, the Giardini's own 7 Clifford Street. 7 Clifford Street is next door to a paper road that has been held up at the land court for nearly a decade. They would like to install a pool on their yard, and because of the shape and layout of the yard, in order to meet the setback issues, they need some relief. And what they're seeking is relief to go as close as 2 feet from the property line, where they would have a 22-foot setback, where they're only required to have 10 feet once the paper road clears. The land court should be close to finishing this one. It's somewhat similar to the Yates application that we had a couple of months ago. But again, it's been held up for many years. And in fact, the town has been so supportive that they have granted the Giardini's a license to landscape and otherwise use the yard sale lot, which has not been transferred to them, obviously, as their own lot, which is, I believe, the first time the town has done that. I don't know if Eleanor is aware of any other examples. They can't put any structures in it, and we're not seeking relief to put any structures in it. But what they'd like to do is be able to get a building permit to start construction on the pool. So hopefully it would be available for next year, which would hopefully line up with the time when the yard sale is finally completed. But as you know, I've given up on saying that they're going to be done soon because I've been saying that for 8 or 9 years to some of my clients. So I think that is a decent summary of what we have here, and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
So the cabana that's shown on this is not part of the application.
So I would say that the pergola is,
Where is the
if we
pergola,
could,
Mark?
with so Eleanor raised this issue, and I will say the client approached me about the pool, and then this other stuff showed up on the application after we filed the application because we only had the survey submitted much later. I would ask the board to give relief to include the pergola as part of the pool. I think it's a bit of a stretch to ask that to include the cabana, so I wouldn't ask that far. But if you were inclined to give relief for the pergola as well, I think that could be within the notice that was provided. And again, the generator only showed up on the plan that we had very recently, so we did not seek relief for that, and I would not assume that would be included in the application. If we needed to come back, we could, but those two are, I think,
The pergola is this structure.
could be
so-
excluded in the decision.
Pergola is the same as cabana.
Yeah, there's no cabana. Or is there?
It's a cabana.
Where is
No,
the
there's no
cabana?
pergola.
What says proposed pergola? Which is it, a pergola or a cabana?
It's just a pergola.
Note approximate location of 20 by 14 cabana.
That's not the plan that we would approve then, because that's the architectural plans. We're gonna be approving the
You
Bracken
wanna
plan.
be certain about what you're getting. I mean, a pergola to me is not what's drawn.
Right, it's on this plan, that's in the packet,
Well, I know that, but.
and it says pergola. So is that the whole building?
Yeah, that's the same as this book.
Yeah. I know. So which plan are we, it's either the Bracken plan or the architectural plans, which one are we going with?
Right, I was looking at this plan.
Yeah, that's right. This all came in yesterday, didn't it? Yes.
8-7.
Last night.
So what does the pergola constitute? Is it a roof structure like?
No, it is an open, the pictures that I've seen, I'll talk to the microphone just for the record. The pictures that I saw and the conversations that I had with the client are a traditional pergola with open, cross beams that would not have a closed roof. Again, since we only got the plan last night, which is not typically how I like to do things and definitely not how Eleanor does, I apologize that is not clear in the application.
And would it have
I mean,
a
in
deck, or is it a terrace?
You asked me if it's stone or wood.
Yes.
If it was a deck, that would require further
That's a
relief.
stone.
Yeah, so I think we're looking at stone.
Is it safe to say you don't know though? And
No.
it wasn't
I don't-
Part of the,
I don't think it's part of the license agreement. I think it's outside the scope.
Well, it's not part of the license agreement because we're talking about stuff that we would do within our own property. we're just within the setback. The license is actually to do work
right, for the-
in the town land prior to the sale, and that excludes structures. So,
I personally, I don't know that I'll find my way to a pool application. I don't think I'll find my way to a pergola and, or cabana, or whatever we're calling it.
Where's the
Generators, Steve just said it's not on.
Yeah, it's not even part of the application.
yeah, I mean, well, yeah, Eleanor raised the issue of what was provided under notice, and I would agree with her that, and again, I apologize that we just got that plan last night, that the generator popped up in this plan. It could be relocated, it doesn't need to be there. If they want to seek relief for it later, if they want to install it later, I want to try to stay as focused on what we have, legitimately in front of us. And frankly, if the board was inclined to give relief for the pool, but not for anything else, that's really the primary request.
But so can I ask a question, Stephen? So
Sure.
the license agreement is for the fence, to repair the fence and landscape improvements, but the fence is along their property line as shown on this plan.
Yeah.
It's not in the, it butts up to the paper road, but it's not in the paper road.
Right.
So they're allowing you to
Go onto the paper road.
go on to use it, but they're not even allowing you to put a fence. Like I was,
Are you putting is your question, are they gonna be relocating that fence as part of the landscape agreement?
but they're not.
Not in this plan, no. If we wanted to fence in that land, that would require permission from the town. I don't think it's a zoning issue because fences aren't structures under zoning, but it would definitely be something that the town would have to sign off on. But that's not the plan that we're proposing.
I have a question. You just said.
Sure. What's your question, Mike?
Is there collateral that's been put up for this contract?
I don't believe on this one, Eleanor. Do you know?
I know that it's been held up because of, insurance has not been provided to the town. I gather they just.
Oh, you mean on the?
Insurance information, but as far as collateral, I don't believe
I
so.
mean, I'm sure that the applicants want to close this deal.
Yeah,
But once they get approval from us,
yeah.
what's gonna
So yeah,
keep their,
keep their feet to the fire. That's a good question, Michael. And so with regard to what Eleanor just said, the license was signed off by the town, but there was a delay in having it released because the owner had not properly provided evidence of insurance. And once that evidence of insurance was provided, it was released. So I think that's what she meant. In terms of whether or not there's collateral from the town used to do a bid process in which you had to submit a deposit with your bid, but they have abandoned that process and gone more to the direct distribution. And I think that this one is under the direct distribution process. It kind of doesn't matter; those deposits are nominal. This,
I'm sorry, are you talking about for the paper road?
yeah,
Excitement
Yeah.
for the license.
yeah. So,
They did not go through an RFP with this because it preceded a change in policy that was adapted to chapter 30.
yeah. So, but to get to the question you didn't kind of ask, but I think you mean is, how do we know that if we give this relief that they're going to do it later? And we actually addressed this question, and I can't remember if you were the one who asked it or not, in the Yates application a couple of months ago. And the term that the board put in place was that the applicant, if they are offered the property and decline to close on it, can then not get a CO. They would be considered both not in compliance, and that the permit and that the relief itself would be terminated. So they would then have a zoning violation, and the town could issue a cease and desist order and force removal.
and you're offering up that language in the decision.
Correct, absolutely.
That's it.
Did you sit on Yates?
Yes.
And that's what you guys did?
Yates, excuse me, I did not, I was in the audience for Yates.
That decision is in
Yeah.
the.
That is what happened
stuff.
with
Yeah.
Yates.
Can I just, if this has been languishing for a decade and you believe it's almost through, why? Why do you think it's
My
all?
clients' kids are growing up. They want to be able to move on with their lives and put this thing in. And they asked, is there anything that we can do? And actually,
No, but
and
all right.
She's
I'm asking about the land court. I'm like, you're saying this has been in process with the land court, waiting for them to issue for a decade, is what we're being told.
No,
No,
But-
the notes said I think 5 years, I think Steve's exaggerating.
everything was sent up to the land court.
2016, I think, the
And
letter.
15 and 16,
Yeah.
they lost it, I sent it back up.
Didn't
Yeah.
they take it out of registration in order to expedite
Right.
it?
So this one, we actually filed a land court deregistration request, and then actually had to call the court and ask them not to file it. We had FedEx it up there and then retracted it because I talked to Eleanor or Vicky Marsh, I forget which one it was, and it was informed that the town had just at that time filed their request for a certificate of title to issue in the name of the town, and the town's, I think it was Vicky Marsh's position, which I agreed with, was that our application to deregister would actually grind everything to a halt, and we should withdraw that as a courtesy to let the whole thing finish. And that was the right move at that time. So the other thing that we did in Yates was that you required that the request for a certificate of title be filed as evidence that we had reached that point where sort of all of the title work and engineering work and all these kind of things that hold everything up forever had been done, and it was sort of at the last point because that had been done in a different case and it was almost ready in this case, and so we did do that. Actually, Marianne Hanley, who I think is here, filed it. But in this case, that document that you required to be filed has already been filed. So we're beyond the point of needing that.
What page is the Yates decision on?
Of the staff?
Is it in the staff report?
Yes, it is. So all the stuff associated with Germany starts
Oh, sorry, I was looking at,
on page
I went backwards, not forwards.
47?
57 of the staff report, and you will want to go to
I just didn't look far enough.
70, 87 of the staff.
So I do think it's important to note that the setback that we are requesting to encroach into, that there's no neighbor on that side because the other neighbor is across the paper road. So there's a 40-foot split between them. And when the paperwork is finally done here, they'll have that 20-foot land between them, or added to each lot. So we'd be 22 feet away where only 10 feet is required.
Do you need to, have permission from the town vis-a-vis the license to go onto that property to actually construct the pool, which is only 2 feet away, which is the only thing will clearly beyond the town property?
Yes, I don't think that the license allows for landscaping, so, I would have to check with the town to see if they determine that this would be outside the scope, and if they did, then they would have to expand it, or we would have to figure out how to do the work without, going outside those terms. Because the insurance policies aren't in place, my guess is they'd be okay with it, but, that's more of a building permit issue.
Is this license all signed off on?
Yes.
And that just happened, Eleanor, because of the, insurance thing?
The
Yeah.
license, I did hear from Eric Overman yesterday, because the one, as you notice in the packet, is dated 2018 and is not executed, so I'm not really sure what that is, but the one that the select board reviewed and approved in August of 2017 was signed. It just was never fully executed by
It
all
wasn't
parties.
it wasn't released to my client because she had not provided the evidence of insurance, but now we have that.
So do we have a actual copy of the actual license with the actual language that it says?
It's the same. It's just signed.
But this is dated 2018.
17 is the vote.
And, all right.
I think I included it in the staff report.
We have to put some storage.
Yes, so the draft that the select board would have reviewed at that August 7th meeting is in on page 77.
So I didn't really pay attention to that one because we had the more recent one, I
don't
thought.
know what that is.
Yeah. So in 17, the select board adopted and approved signing off on it. We can't change the document after that vote takes place. My client executed it in 18 and delivered it, but then it wasn't released back to her until, a few days ago, because when we checked on it, she had never provided the insurance. But that has, as I said, been done. And again, we're not trying to do anything under the license here. We're not trying to do any structures on the town land. The submission of that is only to show that the town has been accommodating of my client in sympathy of the delay that has been going on here.
Well, I don't, the Yates one specifically talks about no construction taking place on or over the lot line.
Sure.
I don't think you can build the pool 2 feet away from the lot line without probably crossing that line.
Well, if
I
you,
also-
if
Insure the whole thing.
yeah, I mean,
That's expense.
I also think that the town was specific in the license that it's, it's coming down the pike, but we're allowing you to do landscaping and maintain a fence that's on your property, so it's access. But even the town's not saying, okay, we're so sure it's coming, you can do anything else.
Sure.
I mean, it's pretty limited to what the town.
right, no, and there's no license for structures, and I agree with that. Ed, to your point, if the zoning board determined that you wanted to make it a condition, which is legally true anyway, that we can't do work on other people's land without their permission, and in this case, the town's land, and that we can't excavate the town's land without permission, that's fine, because it's legally true. And if it required that my client in practicality had to go to 3 feet or whatever because the contractor tells him I can't do 2 feet, or the sheeting is going to cost you so much money that it's insane. We could always build less. We could always move in a foot if that happens. I think Jeff is probably in the best position to tell you that you could go within an inch if you needed to. It's just a matter of steel and cost.
No, I mean, I guess it's written between the lines. I was just saying that the conditions that we voted on in the Yates were not that specific about. I mean, it says this property shall become non-conforming to the landowner to decline purchase the yard sale parcel, but it doesn't say anything about the decision being rescinded. And I just would want to make that much more specific, because I think that was the intent.
Sure. I think that's the impact of it, and I'm happy to have that other language. I think it's certainly within my client's control to make that purchase. So, if they create the nonconformity and the decision is rescinded, that would be on them. That condition would be fine.
Yeah, I think the way it looks in the staff report seems clearer.
What happens with the whole 10-year thing? When they build it because you give them relief?
They never have to
decide
buy
not
it.
to go forward?
Yeah, grandfathering doesn't apply if you're operating under a special permit. Is that what you're asking me?
Basically.
Yeah.
Special
Just
permit?
tell me,
It's a
where
variance.
does
It's a
grandfathering
variance.
apply? Will you just do it without a permit?
Well, yes, and if you do it with a permit, but not in conformity with the permit, or if you do it with a permit and I know this doesn't really happen, but it does, it was approved and no one saw the problem, and then at the CO inspection they find the problem. I think we've seen that movie before.
So just again, I'm not talking about
Yeah.
your client, but if they were to apply for a pool that met the setback,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it didn't meet the setback, they would be eligible for grandfathering?
If If they applied, if they applied for a pool that meets the setback and then they installed it in a way that didn't, and 10 years passed, that would be grandfathered. Correct.
So the 10 years only works out if nobody notices.
Correct.
If you're put on notice,
By the town, yes.
town.
Yeah. Once if you receive a cease and desist, that tolls the 10-year the grandfathering.
that's another interesting dialogue.
Yes. Well, it's a state law that the town adopted. Yeah.
Because if it's never, again, I'm not talking about your client.
Yeah.
If it's never inspected and no one ever knows, and 10 years goes by, you're good.
If not under if we're operating under the zoning permit that you hopefully issue, then the 10-year grandfathering wouldn't apply. But if they decline, if they go into nonconformity because they decline to purchase it, then that would start essentially their grandfathering because they're now in nonconformity. The easy way to deal with that is for the person who runs the yard sale program, who happens to be the zoning administrator, to put a note in her file that if these people decline it, to send the file over to the zoning enforcement officer. I'm sure. I don't know that anyone has ever been offered land that they and declined it, but it's easy for you to.
They have. That's why we had 102 Surfside in front of us. Right? Isn't that what happened? The neighbors didn't buy the land?
Well, that's different, they were offered, and it wasn't they changed their mind.
Oh, no, they didn't want it to be.
Yeah, I'm talking about people who.
Giardini's have been to see me, for a couple of years it was once a month, and now they've been buying less frequently, but they're clearly very intent on acquiring the parcel. There's no doubt in my mind. They've been very consistent checking in on the status and very polite and patient, frankly.
So if Eleanor calls me and says we're ready to go, and we say no, thank you, she would then be well aware to send the file over to Marcus, which I don't see happening, but that's practically how it would work.
And is there a financial hardship here with the pool?
The hardship is that they have been extremely delayed in being able to implement it based on,
I guess with Yates, I could find myself seeing that hardship a little more. But that's me.
I sort of,
Pool,
I wonder, I mean, the land court process is a land court process. I don't want to become a vehicle for people to shortcut the land court process. And Yates, I agree, I could see hardship easier than a pool.
Right. Well, I hope that you will be the vehicle for people to short circuit that process, or at least to get some relief from it. But I agree with you that there are potentially factual scenarios that you would feel, better or worse about.
I tend to agree with you, Susan. I think that you should have to go through the process, and we don't control that process, and it does seem that we're short-circuited.
It seems like it's coming up more and more.
The land court is a land court. I know it takes time from my experience working with them. I don't understand why it would take 10 years or 5 years, whatever.
This one's since 2015.
15.
Yeah.
Why it would take that.
There are some that
Yeah.
But when I ask you about this, I mean, it's not all land court, right? It's some of it is town council delay. Right, so, we're kind of throwing the land court under the bus here, but, if,
I will say, from my observations and experience over the past several years, the survey department is wonderful and efficient, and they don't lose things. I think the examiner's department, I think, goes a little bit. Oh, there's a new head examiner up there. The one who's been up there for a long time just retired. Not blaming that person, but things might change. And the other thing I believe I stated in the staff report is that many of these were approved in the last 18 months with help from private attorneys who are sort of giving impetus to, because it really, the ones that have been approved, there's not been any policy that has held it up. It's just been bureaucratic.
right, and that's unfortunate. I get it, but I don't know that it's our job to shortcut the bureaucratic process, and it doesn't seem to me that it's all land court driven. It's somewhat the people that we've hired to help facilitate the process. I think it's great that people are realizing that they can have their personal attorney help them make more progress. I don't know that a pool does it for me. I'm one person.
I have a question. Just out of curiosity, it refers to the edge of the pool. What's your understanding of where the edge of the pool is?
So under zoning, the edge of the pool is the water line and not the patio.
It looks like that's the way they've located it, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah, that's how zoning reads pools. I know there's some question if it should be the foundation or the deck or whatever, but that's the current ruling.
So it says 18 by 24 bluestone pavers. I assume it's 18 on the width side and not
Yeah,
2 feet
the
on the
coping
width
would be
side.
18 inches.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that would be cutting it pretty close.
it would be cutting it pretty close. Although if you have 2 feet and you have a 2-inch overhang, or whatever it is, I'm sure that they will maintain their property lines if we get the relief. And again, Susan, I understand that this is not the most sympathetic situation in the world, but the Giardinis have really been waiting on this for a long time, and I would hope that the board would see its way to condition a permit that would allow them to proceed with something that, when it's all works out, it's going to have a 22-foot separation to the lot line.
I will also say that in the years that I've been dealing with the Giardinis, they've always said they wanted to build a pool. That's consistent.
They
Seems to
could,
be plenty of room to build a pool.
I know, they
Yeah,
could
maybe
shift
wanna build
those.
it here.
they could shift those sheds and push it up and get it out of the setback. Those are just utility sheds, right? I can't really read
And
this.
that's so small.
Yeah,
This is when I wish I had my iPad, but I usually like the paper.
could easily do that.
You want to see this?
Yeah.
Interesting, it says both are not counted as ground cover, which can't be true. It's not, they have one accessory structure.
The new plan does count.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
Bracken plan.
The bracket plan does, yeah. You're correct, Ed, or Mark, or whoever said that. So I don't know, Susan,
I
Madam.
liked your reference, Steve, I can't find it.
Yeah.
For variance, the criteria, that the lot is rectangular. That generally is ours.
It's a convoluted shape.
Yeah.
Do you want to look at this,
It's a-
Lisa?
it's-
Say that.
Lisa, that you can
It's
see
a, it's
better?
a, it's a, well,
You can see
it's a
that?
shape that doesn't have enough land on the other side quite yet
For the pool,
for the pool.
It's a nice long.
it seemed to be a pretty regular and large lot to me, but.
Yeah.
Oversized. Big time.
So, I mean, I think you guys understand it. I would love to get an approval. I'm not quite sure where you are. I don't want to go round and round. If you are inclined to grant it, fantastic. If you're not, we could take a decision. Or take a poll of the board if you want to, Madam Chair.
Does the board have any other questions right now or comments? Anybody in the public want to speak about this one?
Any,
Anything
anything from the neighbors?
I don't think there was any mail.
There was, through a yard sale convoluted way, a neighbor to the northeast who was already acquired this paper road. He wanted to protect his path, but it doesn't encroach in this part of the road.
Yeah, it's a different side. I talked to him. So for variance, I need 4 of 5. So
I think that's gonna be tough.
Well, depends who's voting, I guess.
If the regular members are voting,
if the regular members are voting, right?
which I think they do.
Well, I think, 1, 2, 3,
I'm not voting on this.
all right, 4, and then Jeff. If you want, are you good to vote?
Sure.
Or should I just,
Yeah, 4.
So who's voting, I'm sorry?
Well,
Susan, Lisa, Ed?
I'm just saying, like, yeah, so it could be one, if we were to vote, Ed, Lisa, Susan, Michael, and Jeff. And you need 4.
you have to look at yours.
So, that's
so-
fine, you can
It's your room.
slowly relinquish your your whole,
He just loves to help.
Yeah.
It's a helper.
I mean,
He's
so
a giver.
it's up to you at this point. Do you want to, do you want to have a vote? Do you want to?
Could we informally find out if there are 4 people who are inclined to say yes? I mean, if I read the board now, I see 2 people who are not inclined and 3 who I'm not sure of. Am I wrong?
Well, I'm not inclined, I don't know where.
All right, so I don't see 4 votes. So I guess what I will do is continue this matter and reconvene with the owner and see what they want to do. So I would request a continuance until the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay. Does someone?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay. So Ed makes a motion. Lisa seconds. All those in favor?
Continue to 9/12.
Yep. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone else want to say it? Did everyone
Oh.
else vote?
Aye. Sorry.
Mike, did you vote?
Okay.
Okay.
There we
Going
go.
backwards now?
Not vote, I'm sorry?
Who did not vote?
Yes.
Kiram, Jim, and
Karen,
Mark.
Jim, and Mark.
Okay,
Okay.
so if we go to 1819 next, Susan, that's a very similar issue.
Sure.
Not yet.
Yeah, were you just saying 1719?
1819.
1819?
There's one ahead of that.
Oh, but
1719.
Why don't we just
1719, yeah, that's fine.
why don't we just start back to the
Okay.
beginning? I think we shouldn't be, but let's ask. We can ask Eleanor, but I think
Because I'm conflicted too, should I leave the room?
If that's up to you, you should at the very least sit in the audience. And
I just thought if there were any questions, I would be giving it.
I think if there are questions, I don't think you can answer them. Right? Is that yeah. Okay. Okay. So next up we have application 17-19 Robert Glenn Elmer et al. And 17 BR Property LLC. Marianne Hanley representing.
The applicant, Marianne Hanley, 17 BR Property LLC, who owns 51 Maury Lane, but the subject before you today is, who owns 1 Low Beach Road, but the land that's in question today is the one at 51 Maury owned by the Elmers and their family. What we are trying to do here today is through the variance process is essentially undo a yard sale that was done back in April of 2018. At the time, there was hate to say it, but paper street abutting 2 properties. One half of the paper street was conveyed to my client's predecessors in title, and the other half was conveyed to the Elmer family. Mrs. Elizabeth Jung, who is one of the principals of the LLC, is here today. They purchased the property at 1 Low Beach Road last September, And since that time, they have discussed with their neighbors the prospect of possibly acquiring that additional strip of land. The neighbors have agreed, but in order to facilitate this, we do have to get a variance from the board because the neighboring property, as is my clients, are both pre-existing non-conforming lots. And what we're trying to do is basically take the yard sale strip that was acquired by 51 Maury, transfer it to 1 Low Beach. 51 Maury would end up in its configuration prior to the yard sale, which was pre-existing non-conforming. But the good thing is that 1 Low Beach, with the addition of the property, would become conforming in all aspects to the dimensional requirements of the zoning bylaw. But we do need to have a variance in order to keep the remaining land at 51 Maury Lane as pre-existing non-conforming. I think you have the plans in front of you in your application. As with all of these yard sales, it's a little bit confusing. I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
Can we assume that there was, that 51 didn't take advantage of having extra ground cover?
Yeah, you have an existing conditions plan that shows you, and the structures are unchanged
Okay.
between the existing and what would be proposed for 51 Maury.
So for the variance, did anyone have any comments or questions about this one, or feel any strongly about getting to a variance on this?
So again, it just brings 51 more back to where it was prior to the.
It brings
requirement.
51 Maury back to where it was, and it makes 1 Low Beach conforming. So we're getting rid of 1 non-conforming lot.
And the variance is because they're both non-conforming? Or
No, the
one
variance
be-
would be required because 51 Maury, we're actually subtracting lot area from it, so it would be less non-conforming. So we need to preserve the status of that as a non-conforming lot, and that's why we're asking for basically a variance for a lot with, I think it's 14,000 plus square feet. I don't have the exact number in front of me.
You said less non-conforming?
No,
More
it would be the way that it was before they acquired the yard sale lot.
More non-conforming than it is now.
Yeah, they would be, their square footage would be 14,792 square feet.
I think because it's going back to the way that it was, and that there's no, as Michael brought up, there was no gain in ground cover or sort of, I'm not gonna say gaming the system because that they didn't know what but there's no, they didn't get a bigger bite at ground cover or take advantage of that, and then now trying to go back. And so I feel okay about this one.
Has the town of Nantucket Board of Selectmen granted the release?
No, we have to go back to them as well for that because that was a restriction that was imposed. But that doesn't make any sense to go to them until we come to the ZBA because the merger has occurred.
Have the Board of Selectmen, Eleanor, had this situation come up before? I don't recall that we ever have, or that I've sat on it if it has. I'm just curious if,
I don't believe so. There've been other situations where deed restrictions were modified or released. More recently, we dealt with quite different circumstances, but there was the one in Monomoy, that was also different, but they do certainly take into consideration and have approved the removal or modification of deed restrictions such as these sort of standard.
so then so if we grant the variance and then for some reason Board of Selectmen says no, then what happens with our variance? We just have a condition that it would be conditional upon the approval from the Board of Selectmen, rescinded if they don't approve.
If you grant the variance, we wouldn't be able to do the conveyance
Right.
without the selectmen's okay.
Right, it would just be weird to have a variance on record that
We wouldn't record it until we get the selectmen's okay. It would be recorded as part of the transaction. And they have released some of these, it's in some of the yard sales, it's all over the place. Some had restrictions, some didn't. I think they tend with something like this where there's no new building lots created and it's an exchange between neighbors. They don't really have a real issue with it.
Yeah, in some cases, there are deed restrictions such as these are not in there because the lot would have been big enough anyway without the yard sale parcels. So but that's all dealt with up front before execution. Those are different circumstances as well. I don't think they're gonna have an issue with this because we're curing the non-conformity of the lot.
Is there anyone in the public that wanted to speak about this one? Anyone from the board have any other comments, or concerns, or questions?
I could find my way to approve it.
I think it's reasonable.
I do too. Does anyone want to make the motion?
Make the motion.
Okay, so Mark, do you want to vote on this one?
Sure.
Okay, so let's do Mark myself, Michael, Karen, and let's do Jim this time. Sorry, or did you make the motion?
Nope.
Who made the motion?
Karen.
Karen?
I'm sorry, Susan, who was the board voting again?
So it's gonna be Mark, myself, Michael, Karen, and Jim.
Okay, so not Jeff. Okay,
Sorry,
great.
let's sit back this time. And Karen made the motion. Does anyone want a second?
What's the motion?
To approve the relief as requested.
I'll second it.
Can I add one thing to the motion?
Yeah.
That it's gonna have the conditions that we discussed about approval from the selectmen.
Yeah.
I'll second that with Michael's addition.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Well, it was
Thank you.
unanimous?
So
I
you-
think it was.
Everyone but Jeff.
Yeah. everyone but Jim.
Jeff?
Great, thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so now we are back to 1819 Peter L. O'Brien and Natalia V. O'Brien, 36 Low Beach Road, represented by Stephen Cohen.
Stephen Cohen for the applicant. So this situation is somewhat similar to the one we had before, but hopefully more sympathetic and asking for less relief proportionally. It's a little different. This lot is, for rough numbers, 52,000 square feet and surrounded by a U shape of land that it will get from the town and when the yard sale process is done. I personally started in this yard sale process in 2011. My client started talking to, my client had a house across the street, or actually still has a house across the street, and started talking to this family about buying it in 2013. And at that time, they were being told this yard sale will be done soon. The owner of the lot, Mr. Teasdale, passed away, waiting for that to happen, and then we waited even more time, and now, finally, it's been 8 years, almost 9 years since the process started, and my client would like to now demolish the house that's there and build a new one. Under the zoning that's allowed, because it's a lot of greater than 40,000 square feet, it's about 52,000 square feet, it can either have the 3% or the alternative minimum of 2,000 square feet. The 3% here is about 1,700 square feet, so you'd have 2,000 square feet allowed by right. But when the roughly 19,000 square feet of yard sale area is added, that would exceed and go up to 2,147 square feet. And I do want to point out for the record that there was a typographical error in the application and in the legal notice and here where it says 2,143. So for the record, the request is for 2,147, which is the correct math. Only 4 square feet, but an important difference. So what my client would like to do is to get permission to build the ground cover that would be available to him and her when the yard sale is completed, whenever that happens. This situation actually is not held up by the land court; it's held up by town council. I know that Eleanor's staff report tells you what the issue is, but I don't know why it can't get cleared, but it's been since 2011 with a lot of process waiting. I mean, the actual thing that has to happen now, it hasn't been going on. There's been a bunch of other steps. But my clients would like to have confidence that they could build the house that they would otherwise be able to build. And the difference of the 147 square feet from a zoning point of view is, I think, fairly minimal, but for their enjoyment of their property, and certainly from a construction point of view of dealing with it, is fairly significant. The relief we'd ask you to grant is to allow them to use the ground cover that would be available under when the lots are combined, and a condition that requires that they couldn't get a CO and that they would be in nonconformity if they decline the offer of the purchase when the town is ready, is certainly something that we would accept. I believe you have HDC plans in the packet. The house has been approved and the cottage is pending. Oh, it was approved last night? Okay, the cottage was at the HDC not on Tuesday, so 2 days ago. And Mr. O'Brien is here if you have any questions for him, but I don't know. Sure.
Thank you all. Just one correction to what Stephen mentioned. We're actually trying to work with Charlie Gibson on having the existing house moved down Low Beach Road, used for town housing, whether it's lifeguards or not. And we're pretty advanced. Charlie's given me an estimate of what the move and new foundation and electrical charges would be. We would be happy to make that happen if the town wants it to happen. The lot itself, as Stephen mentioned, is only 51 or so thousand square feet. LUG3 is supposed to be 120,000 minimum. I have a plan from, it's registered with the town, it's from the planning board, it's signed by the selectmen, and on it specifically says that the amount to be used for planning and zoning purposes is the combined amount. So I wasn't aware that there was really any risk to this. So.
Thank you, Peter. So I actually didn't know that, but hopefully the town or the board sees that as a benefit of that house moving down Low Beach Road to become public safety housing.
Is that documented anywhere in what we have?
I didn't submit it because I didn't know it.
Condition of the town?
I have some emails from Charlie.
And Eleanor, can you enlighten us a little bit as to why this hasn't happened yet?
So, about a year and a half ago, I had a meeting with town council and a few other people with procurement, and it was forced to start the process for this and 3 other properties on Low Beach Road that were all part of the same ATM pool. I had a timeline, a spreadsheet, and had it all mapped out. The first thing that has to happen is the RFP form has to be modified and approved, and town council has to do that. And that is not happening, and I don't know why. I have repeatedly attempted to get a response and a reaction and have it done, because that's the first thing, and then I can take the bull by the horns after that myself, with procurement, handle all the other, and there are multiple steps in the RFP process, but, you know, they're set steps, we know what we're doing, it's a couple months, start to finish. But the first thing that has to happen is we have to have an updated RFP form, so it's just something that she had not gotten to.
I would just piggyback what Eleanor said, and that this actually can't be done without that, because under Chapter 30B, once you hit a certain valuation of land, it can't be through direct distribution. It has to be through an RFP process. So there's no way to avoid it.
And there's no registered land issue, so it doesn't need to go.
Not in this case, yeah. The old railroad bed used to be, but the town went through a deregistration process on that in 2013, 14, a long time ago.
And Stephen, did you say you started with this property started with the yard sale process in 2011?
Yeah, I started for George Cloutier, who's the abutter next door, who started the process, but they're all sort of tied into the same planning process in 2011.
This taking wasn't done until 2016.
Yeah, but that's when we started negotiating it with the town and when the plan was done.
And it was approved at town meeting?
Yeah.
2009.
So, again, there's a process. I don't want to circumvent the process. Why is town council not doing this? And why would they start taking the steps they need to take if we allow things to start happening without that?
Wait,
Well, I mean, like so I'm saying, like, if we're granting variances to sort of to circumvent the process and allow, you know, the people to owners who I'm totally sympathetic with, but why would town council even think that it's a priority if now they're going to have more breathing room because now the owner's allowed to
well, because there's quite a bit of money at stake here with these particular sales.
For the town. So who is it in the town that can push back on town council or tell them this is a priority and it needs to be done?
I don't want to go too far out.
No, I know. Okay, sorry. I just don't see how there's a process that's in progress but not being done, and so this is I'm not going to say convenient alternative because this has been going on for so long, but I'm not
So-
super comfortable with
I
this.
could say, and I'm sure Stephen's gonna probably say what I'm about to say, but in some cases, the town's granted licenses because of the land court delays.
Mm-hmm.
There have been numerous licenses for septic and for landscaping and for the application we just saw. There have been, probably 8 or 9, some for moving houses away from the road and coastal buffer. The town has done a lot of them, in cases where yard sale matters are pending and would solve the problem. In this case, I don't know this particular town council is good at her job, but she is overwhelmed, and this just hasn't been a priority for her. Other things have taken precedence in terms of the matters that she handles for the town. And I don't want to throw her under the bus.
No, I know.
But it is the fact of the matter in this situation is that she has not done that one simple thing for whatever reason. And that's what's holding it up, and that's not the fault of the applicants, and I do again check in with her on a regular basis and say, how's it going with that? And I'm not getting
So
a response.
I guess I would then, but I also don't want to second guess the judgment of town council. Like, maybe there's a reason she isn't doing it. Maybe there's a reason that,
Well, how about if we were to continue it for a month and, I don't know if
Get-
you'd be
get an
willing to write a
opinion.
letter?
or let's get an opinion from her why she
ask her.
doesn't.
Do you think it would have anything to do with the fees that the town would be charged, and that they've got a budget and they're going over the budget? And
No,
the town councils
not
keeping
in
that, nothing to do with
no,
that?
it's not in this case.
In the yard sale program, the buyer pays the town council's fees.
That's what I thought.
So why can't then Stephen assist town council by doing whatever needs to be done on the form and having her approve it or review
It
it?
has to be revised by her, and I think her revision has to do with some changes in chapter 30.
Right.
So is there any assistance you could offer her through
I,
your client?
I would not presume to make state procurement changes to a town form. I think that is beyond my expertise
So-
and propriety. But, you know, Susan, I get that you're looking at this and saying, if this is a problem, why are we taking the pressure off town council? But actually, what we're asking you to do is take the pressure off the applicant, because the town's only interest here is to get all the money that they're going to get when they close this. So you haven't relieved that town interest or that holdup for the town by allowing the applicant to move forward. You've just allowed us to get a building permit so we can get building, and then when the town wants what it wants, which is the money for selling these relatively expensive yard sales, then that's what you get. The 3 that are being held up here on this row, I think, are total a couple $100,000. It's not insignificant. So at a certain point, the burden on the homeowner is fairly significant. And here, like I said, Eleanor mentioned it was approved in 2009, and I've been involved in it since 2011. This is a fairly significant delay, and I think it would be appropriate to grant relief for what we're asking for, which is really only 147 square feet over what would be allowed by right, and certainly within what would be allowed when it finally closes. And of course, the best part about this is that it's entirely within the town's control. It's not even a land court thing.
So Stephen, what could possibly happen here? What are the options? We approved it at the town meeting.
Yeah.
It's supposedly being held up just because of town council. Is there any way that something's going to go awry on this, or is it really just a process thing that's not happening? There's no exposure.
I think that's right,
Yeah.
Jim.
I mean, is there a price negotiation that might
Yeah.
not happen?
The town sets the price. It's take it or leave it.
The reason, so it was approved in 2009, but we had to deregister the railroad parcel with that portion.
Yeah.
So that took quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
So that's why the taking didn't happen until 2016 in this case. The other related properties on Low Beach, the takings happened a little bit sooner
Yeah.
than this one. Frankly, this one fell off the radar. Someone checked in with me. I just started dealing with the yard sale stuff, and I got it going, and boom, we're done. It got held up in this case because Mr. Teasdale was ill, and there was a lot of estate planning and so forth.
Mhm.
So, and then we're launching into the RFP process for all 4 properties. So it is going to be,
It's a bit of a project.
it's a big project involving.
But there's not a risk that you can think of that this doesn't say we did approve it, because I view this similar to Yates, more similar to Yates than the other one we did.
Yeah,
It's more of a hardship on the owner.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm not.
But
I'm
I
not-
don't know if there's something out there that
If I could change the town's procurement forms under chapter 30, I would, but that is not gonna
Well,
happen.
that's not really what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting more that you, I don't know, put a fire under her to get it going, or I don't, I mean, I just,
You can put a camera in my office and see how much I'm lighting fires under her. I'm doing my best, I really am, without total harassment, but.
so I just don't like circumventing a process without understanding why it's not. I appreciate what you both are saying and what the owner has gone
Yeah.
through, but I don't
I
like.
understand completely what you're saying, and I'm not justifying or indicating what decision you should make. I will only say, empirically speaking, when you approved the Yates, since we've made reference to that, she was very quick to turn it around and get an S petition filed, so things did happen more quickly.
Caught our attention for sure.
Once attorneys were emailing her.
So I think, Susan, what might be good to come out of this, and in addition to the relief we're requesting, is if the board wanted to request either the chair or the staff send a letter to the chair of the Plus Department and the town manager and town council saying that you've noticed that multiple people are now seeking relief for this, and if the town could alleviate the need for them to seek that relief by moving this along, that would be a better use of everybody's time and money. So, I mean, up until very recently, nobody was bringing these cases.
Start your term off with a bang. Nice letter to the.
and are you open to the same similar?
Absolutely.
So no CO.
No CO until it's completed, and if they decline the offer, that they would be to purchase, that the relief would be terminated, and they would be in nonconformity.
But even if there's a non-conformity, I mean, how would that conform, how would that even be remedied? Like, then they built a house and then.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
right, but I mean.
Well, the town would bring an enforcement action, and that would be my client's problem. But again, you're speculating, why would they then not buy the land that they've been trying to, now two owners going through two generations on one side have been trying to get this done for a decade, literally for a decade in this case.
So the price has not been determined yet?
No, it has been.
Oh.
Yeah. The real estate
I would
advisory
say
committee
that's-
set it at a per square foot price that would generate a few $100,000 between these 3 or 4 properties.
Is the RFP currently capped at 35,000?
Eleanor, I think it's 30, or is it 35?
The threshold starts at 35,000.
Yeah. So under that, they can do a direct distribution. Over that, they're not allowed to.
So I have a lot of respect for the process point and not circumventing a process. So if that's all we get, a letter to encourage them to speed up, that's a positive thing. I would also add, though, that if you do let this go ahead, and we do have the condition that if we don't purchase the land, we have no way out when the land comes for sale. So you're actually improving the town's chances of getting paid.
Right. The condition boxes them in more. But it's something, like I said, we want anyway.
Did I ask if anyone else in the audience wanted to speak about this one? You would?
Erica Drazen, we live at 41 Low Beach Road, and these paper roads are our view to the ocean. And so we were here when Cloutier asked for the release of the paper road there. It was our understanding that the town would release it, but not sell it without neighbors getting a chance to be heard again. And what happens when these big houses get built, obviously, the bigger house, the less view, and the more paper roads that disappear, the less view that everybody has as we drive down, because generally, like Cloutier did, they put up a huge hedge that's, 15 feet tall, and you can't see the ocean anymore. So it does impact the neighborhood. In Sconset, we're trying to downsize houses rather than upsize them. And it really isn't in keeping with the neighborhood. The house that's there now fits just perfectly. As a matter of fact, it got cited by the Sconset Civic Association as a beautiful example of what a house should look like on the beach in Sconset. So.
I appreciate Ms. Drazen's point, and I do want to note two things. That A, we're only asking for 147 square feet of ground cover here, which is, you know, relatively modest in terms of how much impact it has on a view corridor, and also that we're not seeking any setback encroachment, so that based on the application before you, you would have the setback both from the existing lot line and then the additional space. There's no application to build within either the existing setback or the yard sale lot. So to the extent that's her view line or their view line, there's no application in front of you that would interfere with that.
So if there's a restriction of no building in that yard sale parcel?
No, the select board, and when they issue yard sale lots, either through district direct distribution or RFP, customizes them and puts restrictions in place based on what the situation is. So just for example, there's almost always a condition that says you can't re-subdivide or you can't sell the land, or in fact you need relief like you just got here. Sometimes they reserve public access, sometimes they reserve emergency vehicle access, and sometimes they say no structures. It's all sort of case by case, but it's the select board's prerogative to determine what those rules are.
I appreciate having an opportunity to hear what you had to say, sincerely. I visited with your neighbors, the Raismans, yesterday, who are in 39. And we spent quite a bit of time looking down this paper road. And the location of the house is not near the paper road. The problem with the current paper road is that nobody's taking care of it. So you have invasives that have grown up to a huge height, which means you can't see over them.
We have asked for permission to clear that.
Can you speak? You have to speak through the microphone. Sorry.
So we'd be happy to meet and talk about this, and I can, you can see it from the plans we've submitted to HTC that we do not intend to build a structure in the pay-per-view, and I'm absolutely positive that this pay-per-view that would accrue to us does not have any effect on your view from your house. I've walked, not to the water.
Again, you can't go back and forth. You have to. Sorry.
To the water, it doesn't. It might when you're driving by towards your house, but I can assure you it doesn't.
It actually does. The gable end of our cottage looks down the paper road.
Can you identify yourself?
I'm
please?
Jeff Drazen from 41 Low Beach Road.
Where is your house in relation to theirs?
Diagonally across the street.
Oh, diagonally across.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a setback,
So
correct?
41 is across from Cloutier, which is 40.
Yeah.
They're proposing to purchase 36, or have purchased, I'm not quite sure which it is. And the paper road is between 36 and 40. From the gable end of our cottage, our ocean view is down that corridor. And since we have no idea, because this plan was just approved, we were unaware of it, whether the plan would obstruct that view, which we believe is through the paper roads, just to the southwest of the sewer beds at this point.
So, Stephen, from the HDC plans.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand their concern, but we're not asking for relief to go into the setback or into the paper road. So they've got a fairly significant view corridor. Whatever exists now is not going to be interfered with. Or the house that's being proposed is on the other side of the lot.
So the guest house here, I'm just curious, but the patio that's being shown or whatever's outside, that's not in the paper road?
No, can can I come up and take a look at?
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
there?
sure. I don't even know, I'm sure that it matters. I'm just curious.
No, sure.
So this right here,
Yeah,
does the paper road start out here? That's it, this Elm
this
Street?
is half of the paper road.
Okay.
So the patio is, but the structure's
Right, okay.
What page you looking at?
I'm looking at 37 in the back of, it just has the approved, the HDC.
not affect the second floor.
Yeah. So,
So
like I
at the end
said,
of the staff
there's
report.
no setback relief requested, and there's no intent or desire to build within the paper road. And in fact, frankly, if my client wanted to, if the relief is denied and they have to wait, then there's more likelihood that they would buy the paper road with no restrictions from the town and could build, closer to their view corridor than is now legally allowed. So, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think that the house that's proposed on the other side of the lot is not impacting their view corridor. So I recognize their concern, but it's not an issue here.
Oh, sure.
Jeff Drazen again. So we would be happy if the board put a condition that any existing structures, because these people won't be owning this forever, would not encroach on the paper road should that land be acquired by then from the town. So if that was part of the deal, we'll be perfectly happy with that.
But paper road won't exist anymore.
Well, so what we're asking is at this point, is to have an addition, it would be an additional setback from the lot line, equivalent to where the paper road would have been.
I understand. You're asking for setbacks as they would exist today to remain that way.
Or just have the paper road be
So
I mean, that's,
I think would be a unusual situation for the board to start giving, individual benefits to neighbors to give the great view easements that way. I'm not familiar with the board ever doing that before as a gift to a neighbor. Zoning setbacks are zoning setbacks. And in the lug 3, it's 20 feet, right, Eleanor? So the entire paper road as it exists today is 20 feet wide. So that would be
10 feet.
or 10 feet. So the
It's only 10 feet.
yeah, but we're not proposing. Like I said, we're not proposing to build within the setback. We're only asking for the 147 square feet of ground cover that we would be entitled to when the saw closes anyway, which we could do with no conditions at all.
sure.
Is it Mr. Grayson?
Drazen, I believe.
Drazen, I'm sorry. What I heard you just ask for is if the board would consider a condition that they didn't encroach on what is currently a paper road. So they could build right up to the edge, but not into.
Right now, there's a setback.
Okay, so you're talking about encroaching on the current setbacks.
Right.
Okay, now I got you.
So a 30-foot setback in essence, once the paper road would be absorbed on the side.
I don't know that that's something that we would.
No, I don't think,
Consider.
I don't think that I could vote for that. Include that in
Yeah.
the conditions.
Have we ever conditioned plantings as far as, I know we've done it for hedges so people can see around, traffic, but as far as height, yeah, so some of these hedges are getting ridiculous on the island to the point where it stops airflow and, that becomes an issue. I know that because my neighbors did that. They planted Leland cypress. Those things grow 3 feet a year and they're massive right now. Is there anything that we've conditioned in the past to kind of remedy that or potentially?
I think we've done the other way, right? To say you have to screen to provide privacy. There'll be a funny turn of events if we start, but it may be something that we do consider going forward.
It's fine for privacy, but some of them
Yeah, I know what you mean.
the Great Wall of China.
Did I hear there were invasive species in the
Paper Road. I don't know that there aren't. I believe Ms. Drazen said that.
Maybe we could
Peter said it, yeah.
get the goats over there.
That would be good. I believe that Miss Raisman went down there, or had her. Who's another abutter, had her landscaper go and clear cut the whole thing, and the town, I think, sent her a letter saying that's town land. Don't do that anymore. And it's just grown back when when you clear cut it.
Yeah.
It grows back twice as thick.
Twice as fast and twice as thick.
So, like I said,
No, not to put you on the spot, but is there any way that the two parties can get together and maybe work something out?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. It sounds like that would be maybe more of a
We also have the issue that
a
maybe we need
neighborly agreement.
within the next month, if we continue it, to maybe write a letter to council that also rectify the holdup.
Instead of voting on it now. Okay, I mean, I see three people nodding on that, so would someone want
I
to?
like that idea.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone on the board have any other questions or comments about this one? Anyone in the audience wish to speak about this more? Do you hear what's been suggested, Stephen, is that we continue for a month to give me an opportunity to reach out to town councils?
I think that's an excellent idea, Susan. And if we could come back next month and hopefully get relief, or if we come back next month and town council has said problem solved, even better.
And maybe that gives the neighbors an opportunity to flush out, rather than have us try to craft something that may not meet anyone's needs.
Yeah.
Have you guys sit down and try to figure something out that works.
Sure. So I'm happy to request a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting, and would request that the board vote to authorize the chair to engage in that conversation or communication with town council.
Okay.
Well, that's overall, so
What?
you're engaging with town councils regarding all short sale matters.
Sure.
Yeah.
Specific.
No, yeah. The process in general. The fact that these are now coming before you on a regular basis.
Yeah, and specifically, this would be one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make that motion. Continue.
A second.
All those in favor? So,
Aye.
sorry, how many are voting? Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One, two, three, four, five.
Oh, what did you say? At least it's something about goats.
Did the goat vote?
What is it,
Yeah.
Goatscaping.
What, do they work?
Yes.
Yeah, he's been on the Pocus Road.
No, they're going
You
at
gotta
it.
take your kids over there, I'm telling you.
Can they approach them at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's an electric fence, but
Is it electric?
yeah, unless the girl, I think her name is Sarah, unless she's there feeding him and then she turns it off. Don't get zapped.
No.
Oh. Well, I know where the dogs get
Probably.
it. They think it's on there.
Yeah, she doesn't want to kill her goats.
You taking your kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a friend who
really?
lives right near there, and we drove by one time. And
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So what number are we on now? I'm trying to pull this one out.
That's the goats we need.
They're up in trees.
They're great, aren't they?
They're up in trees.
Eating it? Or just-
Yeah.
Really?
Were you in France?
Yeah,
Did you run into that terrible weather?
yeah, well, it's not, so.
Another
And wasn't it
rainstorm, though.
cold as hell too? Wasn't there like a
was
a
a
hailstorm?
No, it was
All right. Let's rein it in,
Were you-
people. Come on.
Did you
You
wear,
can talk
what
out there.
kind of swimsuit did you wear? Did
Bikini.
Jeez, I
you
know.
wear a
I
bikini?
had to say it.
You have a gavel?
All right, so
Order
now
issue a
we're
gavel?
moving over to 20-19, right? Scott Kelly, 115 and 117 Baxter Road, with represented by Cohen.
Okay, Stephen Cohen for the applicant. So this is your opportunity, I hope, to just get entirely sick of me. But it has multiple applications for relief on a eroding lot. I'm sure you're all familiar with the erosion over at Sconset Bluff, and 115/117 Baxter Road is basically the last lot out there. The next lot is empty, and then you get to the lighthouse lot. The structure on the lot now is the guest cottage of a house that I can't remember if it was, no, it was moved. It was the old Stephen Cohen house, Stephen with a PH, not me, that was moved across to the lower side and relocated. And this lot is subject to a bunch of prior zoning relief that allow that to happen that has no impact on this application. So this is the remaining guest cottage or carriage house or whatever you want to call it. And it is now subject to fairly significant erosion. The building commissioner came by and took a look at it, and I think had a little, held his breath and sent a letter saying that it seemed to be in danger, which I believe you have in your packet. So the request is to move the existing house to essentially the safest spot on the lot. We're combining the two lots, 115, 117, into one lot, and we're moving all the way to one corner. And so we're seeking relief to move that house as close as 5 feet to the side yard setback where 10 feet would be required. And we're seeking relief to go as close as either 0 feet to the lot line where 10 feet is required, or no, 30 feet, I'm sorry, is required, or as much as 7.5 feet over the line if the town grants a license for us to do that. I have been in communication with town council. We have negotiated a license agreement that would let that happen. We've negotiated a one big beach easement that the owner would grant in consideration of the easement to allow the public to use that beach. And both of those are pending at the select board and would be on the county commissioner's agenda on August 21st, I think is the Wednesday. And they just are holding it, and they want to see if you grant the zoning relief before they bring it to the select board. So they do not want you to continue yours just to see what they do. They want to see what you do. And there's also an assent for the town to allow for the Conservation Commission permit that would be needed for all this to be filed, that we've agreed upon. So that's one thing, is moving the house all the way to the corner, potentially to the lot line on the front and to the 5 foot setback on the side. And hopefully if we can get the permission from the town, 7.5 feet over. I would note that it used to be the DeAngelis lot at 113, which is the next adjoining lot. They sold it, and I can't remember the buyer's name. Already did this same thing, I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and they moved their house into what's the road layout and got the same license from the town and the same easement from the town. So the town is already used to this on the exact abutting lot, and we anticipate that they would be friendly to this situation. The town's requirement for moving into roads when they grant these licenses is that you maintain at least 5 feet between the structure and the constructed way, and this house would be 12 feet from the front of the house and the constructed way, so we're well outside that minimum. So that's one issue. Then the next issue is that we would be seeking a variance for use to allow a pre-existing non-conforming structure to change its use. And what I mean by that is that the existing foundation, which is now actually fairly substantial because it's a pull-in garage and a full basement, we're hoping that the Conservation Commission will allow that to stay. Typically, a lot of times they require these to be removed, but we think actually removing it might be more. What? No, it's not a use variance, it's a change of use.
You said variance, you meant special.
I mean, Eleanor has corrected me. It's not a variance. It's a special permit for a change of use of a pre-existing non-conforming structure. And the house itself that's there now on this foundation, I think, is about 7.4 feet from the lot line where 30 feet is requested. So it's non-conforming. And if the Conservation Commission allows us to retain the foundation, which is sort of like half exposed. I don't know if you're familiar with the house or if you've seen a picture of it, but it's all exposed on one side and all on the ground on the other side. because we think that trying to take it out of the bank would actually cause more problems than leaving it. So the goal would be to convert that into an ancillary structure, a non-habitation structure, like a big storage building or something. We don't have HDC plans for it. We were sort of waiting to see if you allow it to stay. If you allow it to stay, we would then, come back on that issue. But the goal would be, it would not be a cottage or a dwelling or whatever. It would be a studio / storage, non-habitation building. So that's,
What do you mean by studio slash?
well, under the zoning code, a non-habitation building has to be something. So it could be,
But you're gonna remove the building down to the deck.
correct. Yeah, and then we'd have to put like a roof or something on it. We would need HDC plans to convert that foundation into something low and small. But the goal at
It's
the
a big
moment,
building. It's not gonna be low and small.
You've lost me there, Steve.
what we would do is take that foundation, cover it with a roof, and then convert it to essentially a storage
I know what
building.
you're proposing.
Yeah.
Well, it says on the plan though, it says a waterproof deck.
Yes, because it's a roof.
That's different than a roof. You're not proposing just having a platform out there that's waterproof, that sticks out of the ground.
Well, what it would look like would be, I think, up to the HDC, and we haven't designed that
It would
because we
look
want to.
like that, Lisa, probably with a wood deck and a roof on top of that.
Yeah, it would look weird.
Well, it wouldn't.
It would look weird, and I just don't, the only reason I would allow that foundation to stay in place is if the Concom demanded that it stay in place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it should go.
Because otherwise, it's just going to be
I
a
don't
big
think,
deck
yeah, I
you can
wouldn't
hang
even
out
deem that
on.
thing safe at that point.
Yeah. I will allow up front that we are seeking several pieces of relief, and I expect you to, or I hope that you will easily issue some of them and give more consideration to others and may not grant them all. Okay? So that one, I'm just telling you, the zoning relief that's needed to do that is to change a structure that is within the setback from a residential use to a non-habitation use.
And non-habitation, would it have plumbing?
I don't know if it has plumbing, and I don't know if it would retain plumbing in that basement. Presumably, like all the mechanical is down there, so presumably there's at least that.
It was
There'd be
only,
Be a really
nothing
cool
mechanical,
outdoor
though.
kitchen.
There's
No, it's not.
windows.
It definitely will not be a dwelling.
there's only
No,
two
but-
reasons I
No,
can think
but
of.
we know what a
that-
dwelling is
Yeah.
versus a studio.
Right.
Students
Well, I
are
mean, it could be
non-habitat.
just. I mean, what they wanted to do is be a place for bikes and that kind of stuff,
They
storage
could make it
building.
half the size, cut half of it off, and make it a little garage that's stuck into the yard.
So
I think you then had the same.
If you grant relief, the only question before you, although you can condition it all you want, is would you be okay if that building, which is within the setback, was converted to a non-habitation building?
Not,
And if-
not as presented. I
not
would
as
be.
okay. So it might be that we come back for that. It might be that
Yeah.
we deal with that later. It might be that we have to go to the HDC and then come back. I assume that the HDC is not going to let us do anything, not going to let the client do anything super weird looking there. It's a very prominent location. I have full faith in the chairman of the board, Lisa.
Yes,
Yeah,
I do too.
he's on the ball.
Yeah,
She.
No,
What?
no, he's
No,
talking
no,
about.
I'm talking about Ray.
HDC.
Oh, okay.
there's only one o'clock today.
So the consideration there is if you would be open to allowing that to become a garage or a shed or something like that, we would then go to the HDC to get approval for it. And if you say go to the HDC first, then we can do that.
I would be more inclined to do that. I mean, I'm certainly open to having a small structure there. Maybe they cut off everything to the right of the garage, and that little section stays. That I don't have any issue with, but I think trying to put a building on top of this or just
Well,
a
then
deck.
it sort of negates the whole purpose of you saying this is in danger.
Right,
We
why are
have
we
to
letting
move
them-
it. Like then,
yeah.
well, if you're gonna put something on top of it,
Well,
right? Like
what we're trying
I
to
don't
do
want
is
a big-
save the house
Right.
and move the house. But then if we end up keeping the foundation, we just want to turn it into, essentially do as little as possible to just keep it until it ultimately needs to be removed. Like when the erosion heat hits a certain point, we would have to then remove it. But what we're trying to do is avoid ripping it out now without also having to fill it, right?
I agree with whoever said that see if Concom even allows it to stay. I mean, I don't want to bless it and
The
then
only
let
reason
other
I would
people.
allow that to stay is if the Concom
Demanded
deemed
it.
it necessary to stay. Otherwise,
For the
it's gonna go
stability.
away.
Yeah.
Like anything else, you move something back from the bluff, You move it back, you remove the foundation, you landscape that
Okay.
area, then that eventually falls
that
in.
would-
and-
Jeff,
Wouldn't
that
be
is,
more
that
of
is
a
not an
cost for the
unreasonable
bank?
position.
Sorry?
To revegetate this.
What?
He's saying-
So I'll just.
Okay.
All right, I just want to go through.
So why don't we start at the first?
Well, there's more relief. Do you want to do them one at a time?
Structure process whole thing.
Yeah, I think we should do them one at a time.
Okay, so
But
let's
did
just
you have
start with
more after
let's
that
just
one?
start with the house move then.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there any opposition to either to both the side yard and front yard and over the line relief requested?
Not for me.
Not for
We've done
me.
it multiple times.
No.
Part of the license specific to, at a certain point, if the building has to be removed, that the homeowner has to remove it at their expense?
I can't remember if that's in the license. I know that the Concom permits, when they issue these erosion permits, include language like that.
The Concom does.
Yeah. And if you want to,
But we should put something.
It seems like a reasonable idea.
yeah,
you know.
as opposed to letting it go over the side.
Absolutely,
I don't
sure.
know how you enforce that if money isn't put in escrow.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to, if it goes over the side, you're supposed to clean it up down on the beach as well.
For sure.
But
And
that's
then
falls under.
there's nothing to put a lien on at this point. But
I don't think
That's
we've done that before.
And to
We've
point
never
it's
done that.
over.
Yeah. I
We've
mean,
never made any sort of
Yeah.
provision for that.
yeah. I think that gets a little touchy to put that in a zoning decision. But if you wanted to, through Eleanor, raise the issue with town council for the license, it's certainly a reasonable point for the town to think about rather than as a zoning issue.
Well, I definitely think it could be a condition, and then at least it's in there, and when somebody's reading it, the license, hearing or whatever the heck it's called,
Sure.
at least they're aware of it as well.
Okay. So what I heard was, I think either 4 or 5 people in support of that, and with Ed's condition, and I don't know if there's sort of other people agree with that or not, but
I don't have an issue putting that in.
I don't either.
okay. So I think
Condition that there be restriction.
The provision.
Provision that
When it's time to, when and if the house either goes over the side or needs to be removed, that the cost is borne by the owner.
by the
It's
loaner.
on town property. We
Right.
should be protecting the town.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in an ideal world, money would be put in escrow.
Yeah. Typically that hasn't been the case, and again, I don't know. I think that asking for an escrow is outside the zoning board's authority, but certainly within the select board's authority. So I think that's something you could, through staff, raise with town council on the license. Okay, so I think we're good on the location. Then the issue of whether or not the foundation could be retained as a non-habitation structure. I think what I heard was only if the Conservation Commission requires it to be retained would you be open to the idea of finishing it in some way.
And I'd still like to,
And even then it would be
Come back.
right. You'd like us to come back
Yeah.
with a plan. So I believe if we get this permit that it would require us to reapply to get that relief. But I'm also fine with you putting that in the decision so we know where you were on it. So that's fine. And then the next one is the height issue. So there's a couple of issues with the height. One of them is the building is close to 30 feet now, and because of the topography, I think you all know it's a pretty steep hill there. You run into how you put it on the foundation. It may be either it may create a nonconformity in one of two ways. Either one side is more than 32 feet, or the whole thing, the average is greater than 30 feet. You have to meet both of those, and we may be in violation of both. But I will tell you, since I know you're going to ask me, can't you cure it? So the answer is not the way the house is currently designed, but you can if you lower the foundation, which is something you guys have asked about a dozen times. The current house is designed to have the basement and the drive-in garage. If we retain that feature, then you're going to be over. If we eliminate that feature, then it's just a matter of adjusting the foundation. So we're asking to retain essentially the design of the house as it exists, which would require that relief. Does that make any sense?
I think the foundation should be minimal, so that when it goes, it's going to.
It's
There's
less
that
damage, less,
Town's gonna have to clean up,
yeah.
this person trying to see. So I would say there's no reason to have, there's a reason obviously, but it looks like there's a 6-foot differential between the,
Is it?
it's up 97, well, no, it's 95 and some, I don't know.
Yeah, the topography changes, and then because of the building code, the size of the foundation changes. It's remarkably complicated, and frankly, I only claim to half understand it. But if you're not inclined to grant the variance relief, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. I know that a height variance is a heavy ask. The only reason to do it is that it has two benefits. One is that we'd be able to maintain the pull-in garage of the current design, and also by getting the house up like that, it would improve drainage and runoff issues. But I haven't found those to be overwhelmingly persuasive with you.
So you're saying other than the fact that there would be the driveway below,
Right.
the rest of it would conform?
If we retain the pull-in garage, the foundation would have to be tall enough that we would need some height relief.
How high would that make the ridge of the building from, say, the grade at 103? And what are you talking about in terms of the height of that ridge?
So there's been a lot of back and forth between the surveyor and the engineer on that, and I actually don't have a clear answer, although you can imagine I've been trying to get it because it's a pretty obvious question.
Yeah, it's hard to determine just because how much are they going down from the 95 to get into the garage? What's the finished floor? How is that in relation to the existing finished floor? I guess I'd like to understand that a little bit more than just say, yeah, you have a height variance.
So if the height variance is a foot or two, which I think is in the range that we're talking about, would you be inclined to grant it? And if so, we could deal with that. But if you're not inclined to grant it, then it somewhat doesn't
I
matter.
probably would for a foot.
Yeah, I think I would too, but it would be nice to see it.
Understand it. I just look at a site section to know what we're approving. It's sort of hard to just do it based on site elevations with no information about where the height of the proposed structure relative to the existing, because the grade's about 3 feet higher. Looks like it goes actually back down to 101 on the left side, and then it's 103.
Are you asking this outside and apart from keeping that other non-habitated space?
Yes, this
so
is
if
for
you
the
don't have the studio that retains that garage.
No, that's irrelevant. This is really just the new
You
foundation.
would still want to put the garage under this building,
Correct.
irrespective of if you get that one.
Correct. We'd still, yeah, exactly.
That's what I was asking. So then you'd have
Two garages.
two.
You could actually probably.
I mean, I don't think if you have the other one, you don't need this one. Like if Concom says you have to keep this structure, and we say, okay, well then you have this driveway, this garage right here, then you don't need to further disturb this area over here by having another garage over there, right? I mean, the whole point of us doing this is to save this person's home so they can continue to have as many days of usage as is left, given the intensity of the erosion, not to give them an extra big deck and an extra garage or
Right.
storage
So,
area.
yeah.
Huh? Party, yeah, like I don't.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, Susan. I think that when people are undertaking these projects, they want to know, well, what can we do? What's reasonable and what is the board willing to approve? And so they've asked me to apply for things that I've told them are an easy ask and things that are a hard ask. And if you say yes to some and no to some, that's okay.
So I guess what I was getting at then, if we said yes to the foundation and you know, being higher and the garage underneath, the pulling garage on where the house is moved, would you be willing to forego and let go of this other structure over here that remains the foundation down?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, do other people feel like we need more information about the height restriction before we can vote on it? Or the height,
Does it make sense to have the garage under there? I mean, it gives you some parking if you choose to use it.
My only concern, Jeff, is that if you have to put a full basement under that, that's just even more excavation on
Right.
a very,
Well,
I mean, why not just have a step or almost pilings?
Yeah, wouldn't it, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a builder, but
Or a
wouldn't it
step
destabilize
foundation
it more?
from the top to the bottom, and it just seems crazy. I don't know why the Concom would allow that.
within that much of an erosion zone,
Yeah, because you're gonna be cutting.
we're gonna be cutting into, like, destabilizing that whole thing.
Right.
So we have like
Just-
another
Destination.
2
I
to
wouldn't
5
want
years.
driving the excavator on that side.
No? Okay. So
you could, you know, the garage under section, you could limit that to the width that it is in 1 car deep.
Exactly.
And then you start stepping up the foundation from there.
Yeah.
But, I
Again, it's hard to tell because we don't know what the hell they're even proposing.
We don't even know what the house looks like.
it's the same house that's there now.
Do you have any pictures? Are there
We
pictures?
have aerials.
I don't think we did submit the pictures now.
So are you currently, have you gone to Concom yet?
The notice of intent was filed with the Conservation Commission, but the staff forced us to, not forced, but required us to continue it until we had the assent from the town, really from the county, I'm sorry, because of the request to move into the road. And the county commissioners did not have the materials in time for their July meeting, so they'll be voting on it at their August meeting. They only meet once a month as county commissioners. So that'll be August 21st. So I expect to be at the Conservation Commission on, I think it's the 26th or 28th, whatever that Wednesday is.
Would it make sense to continue this and let you go through that process, knowing that I don't think anybody's against, it doesn't sound like many people are against the relocation of the building and the 5-foot setback, and then find out what the Concom says about keeping the old foundation, and then giving us more indication of what the height variance would be. Some
So-
photos of the structure.
Yeah, my inclination, and I appreciate your thought, Lisa, and it's a good one, but in this particular case, I'm very concerned about getting the ability to move the house and dealing with that in the fall, and I'm more inclined to take that decision that sort of notes your position, and we can reapply for a different hearing, so that we at least have that.
So that we wouldn't give you the.
What?
I mean,
Yeah.
Or the other building.
You'd have to
pretty
come back
clear
with
that the board is agreeable to moving the house
Absolutely.
over,
Yeah.
moving the house as far away from the bank as possible.
Yeah.
What we're not on board with is keeping the old foundation
Yeah,
and doing some sort of garage understructure.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the more you think about it, maybe a pier foundation is the way to go up there. I mean, it's a summer house,
I don't know why you want to spend the money.
Right, I agree.
frankly, you're right.
yeah. Well, so the Conservation Commission will certainly address that issue, and if you decline to grant the waiver, it essentially deals with part of it anyway, at least the height waiver.
So, so I was looking at the current owner just purchased the property, correct?
No. The current owner just took it out of the LLC to combine it.
Okay.
The two LLCs that sold it are the same person.
Oh, okay, okay. So this isn't a situation where someone's buying it and,
No, that was just a form of the change of ownership.
okay.
So
They do?
if you're not inclined to grant height relief in order to enable the garage pull under,
Wait, is that right?
is that what I heard?
I think
Hang on a
Lisa said she would go up to
A foot? Yeah.
I'm personally a little more lenient, 2 feet.
Yeah.
But I think Lisa brings up a good point. A foot from what? Are we going from the 125 that it's at now to
The ridge.
126? Or are we going, right now it's the It's,
The finished floor is at 104.7.
which is 3 feet out of the ground.
So the,
I wouldn't have a problem with the height issue if taking the building and moving it caused a height issue and we're just sliding it over. But I think this.
And everything relatively stayed the same.
Yeah, because.
But we have no way.
But we don't have any way to tell that. So, can we approve a variance to move the structure as is onto without addressing the other parts of it?
Yeah, we think we would say with no increase in the height.
well,
Keeping the finished floor elevation at 104.7? Because you could.
You know, if we had
theoretically
some
just slide
topo
it over.
maps, we could, you know, we could,
Well, there's a topo on the plan.
the plan does have spot
Page
elevations.
76, right?
Yeah, there's spot elevations.
So,
Yeah, I mean, relative.
I mean, I don't want to hold up the process for him for trying to move the house, but I don't want to. I don't think I don't want to inadvertently like agree to other things that.
Right, I wish I knew what the hell.
And I don't know how does the town feel? Also, they're giving when the town's giving the ability to move the house. Does the town want them to build this whole foundation and a pull-in garage and all this other stuff on still town land?
Typically, the town defers to the Conservation Commission and the HDC on those issues.
Yeah.
it looks to me like you could move this thing sideways and forward a little bit and maintain the same elevation it's at.
I think so.
I think so too, so I
Or if
think.
they determine they can't.
So let,
Right.
I mean, if we want to approve something, let's just approve the move,
Why don't
leaving
we
the height,
give them to 105 for the finished floor? That gives them a half a foot to go up.
fine,
That's fine.
that's fine.
Is it a half a foot? No, sorry, 3/10 of a foot.
Okay. Can you say that again? I
Just
only.
was saying that the finished floor, that we would give you the approval to shift the building over with the finished floor being at 105, elevation 105.
Not greater than.
Not
Not
greater
greater
than.
than 105.
Okay, and then the building is what it is.
Well, then the ridge height can't be any greater than.
Well, the ridge isn't going to change.
The ridge would go to
Well, the ridge has changed that
126.1.
same 3/10.
Yeah, the same 3/10, 126.1.
And then the other
And
parts.
if Concom wants to let them put a full basement, you know, a garage under,
Yeah.
that's-
Just so I understand what you said, Lisa, is the 105 the current elevation or the?
Yeah, the
new-
current elevation is 104.7,
Yeah. Okay. So you're basically
giving you
setting
some fudge factor.
on the new lot. Okay. I think that is very generous. So that would be a height variance to the extent necessary to effectuate a first floor elevation of no greater than 105. Yeah. Okay. Great. And then it's up to the designers and engineers to make that work. So the other relief that we're applying for, which I don't think we need, but we've been advised by the zoning officer to request it, is relief from the 90% upland rule, which I think you see very infrequently. But both of these lots, when they existed as separate lots, comply with that rule, which actually used to, I think, only be 80%, but was changed many years ago to 90%. It requires that a new lot have at least 90% upland and no more than 10% wetlands in order to be a buildable lot. So what's interesting here is that both of these lots are now, because of the erosion, less than 60% upland. However, the interesting thing is that it's not 90% of the lot, it's 90% of the minimum lot size for the area. So therefore, and this is the argument that I made to Marcus, which he somewhat agreed with but recommended getting relief anyway, was even though both lots are now non-conforming, the non-conformity due to erosion doesn't count against you. And when you have when you're at because we're combining the lots, you're never creating a lot with a greater nonconformity, because one lot, whichever lot is combined to the other one is nonconforming and the other one is increasing or decreasing that nonconformity, and therefore it doesn't need relief. And Marcus, I think, and Eleanor, correct me, basically said I agree with that, but it might actually need zoning administrator relief. And since you're going to the board, just ask them to waive the rule. Does that make any sense? So I would ask for relief to the extent necessary of the 90% upland rule.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
either.
reasonable.
Yeah, I don't either, but I don't want to have a problem later.
Fine.
Okay. So,
So I think that covers it. Eleanor, did we cover it? Like I said, this one was a lot. So I think we're good on the location. I think we're good on the height. I think you were not inclined to deal with the existing foundation until the Concom and probably the HDC gives us some wording on it. And we're good on the 90% upland rule. So I think
Yeah,
that's
I think
everything.
my whole point with that is, like, if they're gonna build something that's gonna make it look HGC approvable, they're putting a lot of money into something that's gonna just, the old one, meaning the old foundation, if the HGC is gonna make it look presentable, then all of a sudden they're putting all this money into something that's gonna,
It's got a short life.
It just
for
doesn't,
sure.
it
doesn't make any
doesn't
sense to me.
Yes,
They're asking
I-
for multiple bites at the apple.
I
Yeah.
know,
It's just
it's
ridiculous.
just, I'm
So
not
I don't
inclined to
I don't
approve
disagree
that.
with that, and I think we're good with the relief that was granted,
so are we,
or you
So
seem to be
part of our
granting.
relief arguably would be then you would have to remove that. You can't leave it.
I think,
As an
I think it
eyesore.
should be, and the only reason I think he might change is if the Conservation Commission
Said.
asks that the foundation itself, and only the foundation, remain.
So
So
I
that you
think,
don't-
I think
Stuff.
we should put that in as a condition,
I
then, that
agree,
we think
sure.
that it should be removed, we're not going to approve that unless the Conservation Commission requires it.
It requires it to be retained. Okay, and then if the Conservation Commission requires it to be retained, there are then two options. It could either be filled, dirt, or it could be converted into something.
And then if it's
And if we-
converted, it has to come back.
If we want to convert it, we have to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's
Okay.
being filled in, I don't care.
What?
well, we're gonna,
Um,
we don't, I don't think you're gonna withdraw it.
You're
We're
not
gonna,
gonna-
we're gonna,
Well,
we're gonna,
you could withdraw it though, because he'll have to file a new, because you want this to close today.
Yeah.
If it's, that issue stays open, then you can't.
So in terms of approving, denying, or withdrawing, I think we would withdraw relief, the relief request on that issue
Exactly.
with the idea that we would then come back.
I have one
Related
other,
to the removal of the house, the remainder of foundation.
Right. Because it has to be a yes,
so
no, or
if he
withdraw.
withdraws, are we,
Only on that question.
right, but I
I would still make the
would still
condition.
wanna have the condition in there that the
Yeah,
only
he's
way,
referring to the permission to alter the.
right, to alter the use. Okay.
Yeah.
Both physically and.
Okay,
But we'll still make the condition that the old foundation has to be removed.
Yeah.
unless
Unless
required
it's
to
required.
remain.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, I'm
Right.
okay with that.
I have one question. One of these plans shows a new set of steps out of the back of the building and then also a patio. What's,
On the new building?
yeah,
It's a stone patio.
Yeah.
So
I
this should, this is, I think, in
stone?
steps and patio in the red.
I don't know if it says it, but it would have to be because I know where the 50-foot vegetative wetland buffer is, and you couldn't put a deck there.
Oh, so you're right, it says patio. I think patio is assumed stone.
Patio is not a deck, yeah.
But I think,
and that would need Concom approval anyway.
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
yes.
But they wouldn't allow a wooden deck. They may allow a stone patio.
And the size of and number of steps is all relative to how far the first floor is out of the setback.
Yeah, because it's on a hill there.
Right.
Okay. I don't think I asked, was anyone in the public here to speak about this one? No, okay. Okay, so does someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
So to approve, only the relocation of the house to the new proposed site with the first elevation not exceeding 105 and the ridge height not exceeding the, I think it's 126.1. Is that right? And also that the existing foundation needs to be removed entirely or filled, unless the Conservation Commission deems
and then
otherwise.
What about the
dates,
dates? Do we want to propose
The what?
go from
Dates.
moving.
construction dates?
And
I
this is
think
all
so.
subject to a license agreement.
Yeah.
what
And
we're-
also when Tuscany or whoever does the move does.
Right. I mean, the goal is to do the move as soon as possible this fall because another winter storm season. Yeah, November is the goal.
So
And-
we can
Do we put dates usually on moves like this?
Yeah,
We usually do.
Yeah.
On a,
I think
on a
we
move,
should, don't we?
okay.
SOH and SR1, not a SR1.
I just was thinking,
So I would ask you to not, and this is why, or I would ask you to not do what you normally do, because if we're able to move it in November, then we would have the house set on a foundation in November, and you're basically just doing finish work, so the rule wouldn't do anything. If we miss the winter window, and then we're talking about the spring, what I don't want to do is be in here begging for relief because we're coming up on the summer, and we need to get it done, but we need a couple of weeks or something like
The other
that.
thing we could do is just change the date to 4th of July,
yeah.
Sure.
rather than Memorial Day. That gives you a little bit more time.
I think we ought to leave the dates in there. I mean, it's August, September.
You don't think we should have the dates?
No, I think we should.
Yeah.
I think we
And keep
should.
them as Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there's no winter season, Steve. That work will take place all year long.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. I tried.
Okay. And
So just for the record, is it Memorial Day or Labor Day? No exterior work.
Right.
and then the 90% upland requirement,
Just grant relief to
right?
the extent
Grant
necessary.
relief to the extent necessary.
So this is a mix of, I think it actually, we hit all variances on everything because the one that was a special permit was withdrawn. Is that? Yeah, so you'd need to approve that.
withdrawal.
The withdrawal of that portion of it.
And then we also wanted to put a condition in that, someone mentioned that this is conditional upon a license from the town, and something about, put a condition about the cost of when and if this goes over or needs to be raised, that the cost of removal goes to the buyer.
Or the owner.
Owner, sorry.
Yeah.
So that's your motion?
Yes.
Okay, anyone want a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. Cameron, did you vote on that, or Jeff?
I did, but Jeff can.
Okay, so Jeff, Michael, me, Lisa, and Ed.
All right. So that was 5.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate your quick action on this.
thank you.
And we have to separately vote on the withdrawal?
I think it's better to just.
Oh, we do, sorry, I thought it was a part of it. Okay, so someone make a
No,
mo,
because you're approving
okay.
positive stuff.
Okay.
So
and then
if someone would make a motion to withdraw the request for it was a special permit, right?
yeah, on the change of use, yeah.
Change of
Second.
use. Okay, all those in favor with approving the withdrawal? Aye, same voters.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Sure. I was gonna say, I thought I put mine on Do Not Disturb.
Madam Chairman,
What?
speak to Jeff now.
Yeah, sure. Who was he asking if you wore a bikini because it was hot? Is that what he
You're
was
already
asking
making
you?
it hot, Ed. Jesus.
I don't really want to, I just wanted to get.
All right. We are making progress here now.
Just for the record, I did see Ed's car parked in the Green Lady parking lot when I was coming down Amelia.
He was probably at yoga.
Waiting, I got my appointment. You have to make an appointment, I heard already.
Yeah,
Is it open?
I think so.
Sunday.
It's so great that it's on such a low trafficked road. It's just amazing.
You ready?
Oh, are we back? You're back from break? Okay. Okay, so the next one is 2119. This is an appeal. Patricia A. Halstead and Michael S. Leavitt, trustees, 41 CHR nominee trust owner, and Ice Bear LLC appellant for 41 Chuck Hollow Road.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Dan Bailey. I'm with the law firm Pierce Atwood in Boston. I represent Ice Bear LLC, which owns property abutting 41 Chuck Hollow Road at 5 Parsons Lane. This is an appeal of building permit issued for construction of a single-family residence at 41 Chuck Hollow. The basis for the appeal is the building permit was wrongfully issued because the certificate of appropriateness issued by the Historic District Commission has been appealed to the Board of Selectmen, and there's been no resolution of that appeal. So it's actually a fairly simple issue, unlike what Mr. Cohen has been proffering earlier. And the question before the board is whether the building inspector should in fact be issuing building permits for properties that are the subject of an appealed HDC certificate of appropriateness. The facts in this one are pretty easy. The basis for the appeal is that the proposed house and pool are inconsistent with building with Nantucket in mind, but that's not your issue. That's for the Board of Selectmen to determine. That appeal is scheduled to be heard by the Select Board on August 21st. A building permit for the house was issued on June 14th. Work has started. There's been excavation work done. I drove by the site earlier today and I could see construction workers on site appeared to be assembling some boards, but all I could see was from the road. It's our position that the building permit, that a building permit should not be issued while an appeal is pending. The reason that this is here, as opposed to someplace else, is that the zoning bylaw at section 13926C says that a building permit application must be accompanied by a certificate of appropriateness. Normally, in connection with most land use laws, permits and approvals aren't considered final until all appeals have been resolved. In this particular case, neither the HDC enabling statute nor the Nantucket zoning bylaw speak to certificates of appropriateness, and this issue, they don't address this issue, to be blunt. So, a couple of things to mention. Our feeling is that allowing someone to go forward at risk, and we acknowledge that, and I think they will acknowledge that it's at risk, to move forward undermines really the ability of the appeal. If they're moving forward at risk, there are really a couple of things that happen. One is anytime a structure is built at risk, it means it's going to be there a long time, even if it is ultimately found that that structure was built unlawfully. There's a legendary case in Truro where a house was built at risk, and I think it's still there. It's been at least 20 years. There was another one in Newton that took over 15 years. The legal process grinds slowly, and it grinds particularly slowly once somebody has $1 million plus house up, and they'll do anything they can to defend taking it down. The other thing I think the board should keep in mind as a sort of a policy matter is that if you affirm the decision of the building inspector here that a building permit can in fact be issued, well, okay, this is a situation where a house is being built at risk. But the HDC issues a lot of permits for taking structures down. And if you can take a structure down while it's on appeal, while an HDC decision on appeal, there's no putting it back. Similarly, they approve an awful lot of house moves. And it's going to be awfully hard to move a house back, particularly if improvements have been constructed on that lot where the house was moved from, if the appeal is ultimately upheld. So, this is a policy issue for this board and for the community, and it presents some difficult issues. And there's a good reason that generally these land use permits aren't allowed to be exercised until they're truly final. There's been a situation in Nantucket involving properties on Liberty Street that have been, I think they're in the third round of litigation. Well, if that's my client or any other lawyer's client, next time the advice is going to be, oh, you've got your certificate of appropriateness, take that thing down tomorrow. Move that tomorrow. Don't let it get changed on appeal. And if you uphold the building inspector, that's just what you're going to have, is that precedent. And it's going to make it very difficult for someone to go to court and get an injunction to stop it because the town has spoken on the issue. That's, it's not a big, complicated issue. It may be a complicated one to wrestle with, but that's it in a nutshell. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I really don't have much else.
Does the board have any questions?
I just have one question, and that is if the Board of Selectmen vote either fashion that it is not favorable to your client, will you take this to Superior Court?
I don't know yet. I just haven't had that discussion with my client. There is one other thing I want to speak to. Mr. Cohen shared with me last night that the Historic District Commission last night adopted a policy that I think has been shared with you, saying that building permits should be issued if certificates of appropriateness have appealed. Well, that's not very surprising. I think most permitting boards would feel pretty strongly that the permits should go forward in light of appeal. Also, it's not their call. It's your call. They don't have any authority to make that decision. And it also suggests that they're being a little short-sighted because the Historic District Commission has a right to appeal decisions by the selectmen. And not that elected officials on different boards ever disagree, but one can certainly see a circumstance where the Historic Commission refused to approve a permit to remove what they deemed a historic structure, and the Board of Selectmen reversed that decision. The Historic Commission's policy, which was adopted with precious little notice, other than a note on an agenda, a town-wide policy, but again, I'm not here to talk about open meeting issues, but their policy now prevents them from appealing the Board of Selectmen. That's what I've got.
Okay. Does anyone know, when is the
Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, when are they meeting on this?
21st.
8/21. Okay.
I mean, my experience over the years has been that building permits are issued during the HGC appeal process. I mean, part of the issue with the HGC appeal process is that appeal cannot be submitted until the minutes are voted in. Sometimes that takes a long time. So, I mean, just in terms of the logistics of the whole thing, it could take months.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually involved in an appeal years ago that was a building permit had been issued, and you know, and we were working on the project during the appeal, and we ultimately did win the appeal, but I just, you know, one of the issues with that was by the time the appeal was actually even brought to us, it had been 2 or 3 months. You know, we were under construction. So, you know, I just think it's unfortunate that, and I'm going to also say that, you know, I'm not sure we're the right people to make this decision. I mean, it sounds like a real legal issue to me, and not a decision for the zoning board of appeals to make a town policy as
No, I
whether or
agree.
not this is, you know, allowed. But it has been been happening here since I've been practicing here.
I just have a question for
Attorney Brown.
Attorney Brown. Is this unique? Is Nantucket unique or compared to other municipalities?
Well, yes.
Well, I mean, with regards to this.
Yeah, it varies. I mean, Nantucket's unique in that you've got an enabling statute. Towns that have historic districts, they're very much adopted on a town-by-town basis under the authority of state law, and each one of them is a little different. You know, I don't know the answer to, you know, what is the rule in Newton, though I'm pretty sure, because I can remember being held up in Newton, that, you know, back years ago, I was doing some work for Boston College, and we had neighbors appeal a Newton Historic District Commission determination, and I just know it stopped it. I don't know I can't remember what the law was, you know, but, you know, they could have just decided not to go forward. Right. I mean, a lot of times what happens in the face of, I mean, a perfect example, special permits. You can go forward now with a special permit on appeal, but no bank is going to lend you the money to do that. So if you've got a significant project where you need loan money, you know, you really can't go forward. The only time you see a special permit typically go forward is if it's a use special permit that doesn't require you to spend a lot of money.
I mean, the other thing that's unique about Nantucket, though, is our historic district is island-wide.
Yep.
Which opens the door up for any neighbor to appeal anything just because they don't want to see something happen. And I think that's, you know, to me, that's sort of, I think they should be able to raise an appeal, certainly. I'm not suggesting that they can, but I think allowing people to proceed at their own risk is.
And if I could, I'd just like to respond to Lisa's comments earlier on timing. And I might be wrong about this, but I think you're right. It can take a long time before the minutes get posted and you go through that elaborate process. But I don't think you can pull a building permit until the minutes get filed with the town clerk.
I don't think that's true.
No, you can.
You can pull a building permit before.
That historically it's been that way because that's what happened. Well, and they've been issued. Nobody's ever asked for the minutes.
I think, I'm sorry to wedge in here, but Stephen Cohen, I represent the owner here, so I'm going to participate anyway. But I think you're maybe confusing the difference between the COA and the minutes. And you can get a permit on the COA, but the appeal needs the minutes, and the minutes are often approved later.
Yeah,
so
2 months
I think
later.
might be the difference.
So there are times where you can get a permit based on the HDC has issued a COA but hasn't filed the minutes yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can get a permit before something's been filed with the town clerk?
No, the COA, and you know, my understanding and my observation of the process, and I'm not speaking for the town, is that the application, when they sign it, becomes the COA, and they will post that with the town clerk, and that is when you can apply for a COA. However, the minutes might get approved on a rolling basis months later, and I think Lisa's point was that the select board will not actually hear the appeal until there's an approved set of minutes. So it's possible that the COA would get posted before the minutes would get approved.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happens here. We approve things and we have decisions, and we don't wait until we've approved the minutes to
issue
sign a
your- to-
decision
yeah.
or for that to go through the
Right, I think
20-day
that's the
appeal
same.
process.
But
It's
when
same
is the
thing.
time for filing appeal begin to toll, when those minutes are
Yeah,
approved?
10 days from when the minutes are recorded.
No, it's 10 days from the COA being posted.
Oh, it has nothing to do with the minutes anymore?
No, it used
For
to
the
be. You're
hearing,
correct.
but not the.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that Copeland and Page did when they came in and said that was wrong. And
Okay,
Oh, good, because that seems,
Yeah, because the appeal that I was involved in, it was from the minutes, and the minutes didn't get filed for 2.5 months.
So there is no delay any longer, it's 10 days, you get 10 days.
10 days from the COA.
is issued. So
Correct. To when it's posted with this.
Yeah, and that's just the point I want to make is, this is pretty quick, because I worry about missing them. And I know other lawyers worry about missing it because it's a pretty, the COA comes out, you have to be paying attention to what gets posted, and you've got 10 days. And then the selectmen are required to schedule a hearing within, well, what you do is you give them the next 5 Board of Selectmen meetings when you're available.
It does seem odd to me that you can proceed with something that's under appeal, although you can't, you have the ZBA decision as a special permit. It does seem odd. Isn't this a question?
I mean, a planning
Town
board
council?
permit, you can proceed at risk, can't you?
Concom.
No, you certainly cannot with Concom. Absolutely not.
Well, you can certainly file and get a building permit
So,
before it's recorded.
You can't get a building permit unless a special permit or variance has been recorded with the registry of deeds, which can't happen.
Yes,
until
I know, the
appeal period.
ZBA, but the Concom, I
It
think.
can't happen, okay, so
No, no.
that's an important distinction. It can't happen until it's
been
recorded,
recorded.
and it can't be recorded if it's being appealed.
no, that's
Right.
that's not accurate. It used to be. So I'm sorry. Could you open it up to public comment? I'd like to
sure,
make some.
yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to correct you, Ed, what you said used to be true, but it's not anymore because of this change in state law. It used to be that you couldn't record a special permit until you got that no appeal taken stamp. But now you can record it with the appeal taken or no appeal taken stamp because the state law was changed to allow you to proceed at your own risk. So I am Stephen Cohen, as I think you may recall. I represent Patricia Halstead and Mike Levitt, trustees of the trust that owns the property that is the subject of that owns the building permits that are under appeal. I think Mr. Bailey has made several very, very good points, almost none of which are relevant to the question in front of you. And what I mean by that is that there's actually a very narrow legal question in front of you. The building commissioner has received a certificate of appropriateness from my client's representative and has issued a building permit pursuant to that COA. If you look at the bylaw, it says that the building commissioner shall issue a building permit. It actually doesn't say may, it says shall, when presented with an application that includes a certificate of appropriateness. It doesn't say for which the appeal has run or for which no appeal has been taken or any of that language. And Mr. Bailey is suggesting you read that in where it doesn't exist. The Conservation Commission statute specifically says that you can't do work if there's an appeal. The zoning statute it used to say you couldn't do work if there was an appeal, and then the state changed it because there were so many meritless special permit appeals just designed to stop people from moving forward, and there was something like a 1% success rate on those appeals. So the state said, okay, we're going to allow people to move forward at their own risk on special permit appeals, but variances, because there's such a high failure rate on those, because there's a decent passage on those appeals, we're going to say no moving forward on variances until the appeal is resolved. So those statutes deal with this issue directly. The HGC statute does not address that issue. It just says that you need a certificate of appropriateness to get a building permit, and then that's further reflected in the building code. And the building commissioner, I think, rightly has exercised his discretion to say, because the statute does not address the issue, and because the local bylaw says that I shall issue the permit, that he has issued the permit. That is the only question in front of you. Has he acted arbitrarily and capriciously, or has he acted within his discretion? And I would argue not only has he acted within his discretion, he's acted as he's required by the local bylaw. So that's really another question you have to ask. All of these policy questions are not questions you should be addressing, but just for the sake of playing it out anyway, the thing is, if the HDC approves something, then it has been deemed historically appropriate, and in almost no circumstance is that ever overturned. I have personally won several appeals of HDC denials where they have made decisions that are arbitrary and capricious because they're outside of their jurisdiction for various reasons. But I'm not familiar with anyone winning a appeal of an approval to get an approval denied. The risk of that happening is very, very low. So I would say that the best analogy to these HDC appeals, where the HDC has approved it, is a special permit, where there's almost no likelihood of a appellant maintaining that appeal, and the remedy for the appellant who wants to prevent construction is not to prevent the issuance of the building permit, which is allowed. It is to seek injunctive relief. In other words, go to court and get the court to say, look, if this ball gets started, once the train pulls out of the station, it's going to create such a mess, it's never going to happen. Don't let them work under that permit. And it is up to the appellant to get a court to agree with that. The interesting thing about injunctive relief is it requires you to show significant likelihood of success on the merits of your case, which is why almost nobody gets them, because most of those appeals are baseless or nearly baseless, and don't meet that burden. So I don't think that you have to get into the policy issue at all, but if you do, I think the policy issue is really that you should be supporting the HDC in its interpretation of its statute and in the building commissioner in the exercise of his discretion, because Mr. Bailey did not suggest any reason for you to find that he's outside of his discretion in issuing this permit. He would have to show you that there is a prohibition, a clear prohibition, that he doesn't have the discretion to issue this building permit, and therefore has acted arbitrarily and capriciously in doing so. So because he hasn't demonstrated that burden, I would suggest that he hasn't met the legal burden, and you should be finding in favor of the building commissioner and denying the appeal. And to the extent there are any policies involved here in which the town may or may not want to encourage one version of this or the other, that's really up to town meeting or the select board to be weighing in on policy, not for the zoning board to be making that decision. So that's my request, is that you deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to respond?
Quickly respond?
Sure.
What the bylaw says, it doesn't say that the building commissioner, building inspector shall issue a permit. It says that an application for building or use or a demolition permit shall be accompanied by the following documents: a certificate of appropriateness issued by the historic commission. Period. The question you have is whether a certificate of appropriateness that's been appealed is a final permit. That's really what's before you. And I'll disagree with Attorney Cohen. It's your job to interpret the zoning bylaw. And that's why we framed this appeal the way we did. It's a question of whether the building inspector has the legal authority to issue a building permit when a certificate of appropriateness has been appealed. Now, I'll agree with Stephen that the zoning bylaw could be a lot clearer on this. It's not. But that's what zoning boards do. They interpret ambiguous provisions of zoning bylaws. And if your view is that it should be a final certificate of appropriateness, that supersedes the building inspector. Thank you.
Yeah, he's right there.
Yeah. Paul, do you want to comment on this?
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the board. For the record, I'm Paul Murphy, and I'm the building commissioner for the town of Nantucket. I don't have a lot to say on this, but I just wanted to let the board know that I think the permit was properly issued. I don't think an appeal of an HDC certificate in any way invalidates it. And I've had a conversation with the town attorney about this, and the solution is injunctive relief. It's just like a building permit. Anyone can appeal one of my building permits, and the remedy there would ultimately be injunctive relief. It wouldn't stop, just because a building permit's been appealed wouldn't mean that, the permit would be invalidated or that work would have to stop. That would be by an order of a judge. So it's kind of like that. But I think it was properly issued, and I hope the board upholds my decision. I don't have a lot more to say unless anyone has any questions for me.
By statute, you have to issue a building permit within so many days of an application coming across your desk?
Yeah, within 30 days of the request, and we evaluated this application. There were no violations of the zoning bylaw, and these folks are entitled to their building permit.
Do we have any interest in, not question for Paul, getting a legal opinion as to this issue, or?
I think Eleanor Paul had discussions with town council. Were you privy to any of those? No. Okay.
Paul reached out to him on behalf of the HDC chair.
And Paul, maybe you can summarize
Essentially, what Attorney Cohen was advocating, that it's just an at-risk permit, nothing more than that. We can't control appeals, and it in no way invalidates it. That language isn't in the act. I don't think it's ambiguous. I think it's very clear. If it's not in there, it doesn't apply. And that's essentially the summary of the town attorney's position.
I'm curious, if I were getting a well permit, because you can appeal a well permit. Yeah, well, no, not to say I was putting in a spite well, that somebody wanted to spite me, but not by appealing the well permit. Would I be able to get does the Board of Health issue well permits if they're appealed? I don't even know.
Wouldn't the permit have to be issued first and then appealed? And
so could I get a building permit with that well permit that's under appeal?
Yes, I think you can. You just have to show the building inspector or that you have water available.
Stephen, what was the section that you referenced saying that the building commissioner has to, shall approve, not?
It's section D of, what do you got here?
139.26.
Yeah, 139.26D, and it says, and I'll just read it for the record, is satisfied that the proposed work or use conforms to the provisions of the chapter and all laws and ordinances applicable thereto. He, meaning the building inspector, shall issue a building permit or use permit thereto within 30 days of a submission of a complete application. So, if the application contains the appropriate materials and those materials are not in violation of any zoning ordinances or otherwise, that he is required to issue that permit. Nowhere does it say, and there's no appeal pending.
Maybe if nothing else, we should put this on the list of things that could be tightened up under the bylaw.
So Stephen, though all those other statutes or bylaws specifically address appeals, so this being silent, you're saying?
Yeah, so the Concom statute and Chapter 40, which is the zoning code, specifically address the impact of an appeal, and the HCC Act and the local bylaw do not address it. And my position, as well as I think through the building inspector and town council's position, he suggested was that the lack of direction leaves the discretion at him or requires him to not withhold it if he's not prohibited. And I think that's the position that this board should take, that the building commissioner has acted within his statutory authority. And frankly, the benefit of it, if anything, is going to be that it dissuades people from meritless appeals of approved HCC COAs. Because right now, that's what we have is a bunch of, bullies out there, or people who want to preserve their views, or whatever, who try to hold people up to shake them down. Well, that's the net result here.
You're right. It is a policy decision, probably beyond this, but I don't want to foreclose on people's right of appealing, even though these bad apples exist. There's also good reasons to appeal.
Yeah.
And there probably are good policy reasons in those cases
Yeah.
to not go forward with let the horse out of the barn. But I don't know in this case.
I don't see our role as creating our policy. I think we're a regulatory board. We look at the regulations. The regulation we have that's our guiding regulation seems to be pretty clear what the building commissioner's responsibility is. I don't see us as and again, I'm just one person, but I don't see us on weighing in on the Enabling Act and what's missing there, and then changing policy or creating policy based on a silence in that statute. I don't see that as our job. I'm content with the summary of town council's opinion from the building commissioner. If the rest of the board feels that you want more from town council, then we can look into that and continue this, but I don't see a need to, especially, you know, hearing from you that this is, it's been how it's been,
And they've even, it sounds like, tightened it up by having the appeal period start with a
smaller time.
smaller time frame.
Yeah.
So whereas I appreciate the ability, the appeal and the moving forward, I don't think that this board is prepared to either change the practice of the town and our zoning bylaw or create policy. Does anyone, and if anyone feels differently, it just seems like from what I'm hearing from the board, it's kind of where we stand.
I think the building commissioner acted appropriately.
Yeah,
by issuing the
and
permit.
there is an appeal process through the courts. Through
These guys can do whatever they want.
And again, if you continuing to build, knowing that there's an appeal, knowing that there's a chance that it could be reversed, you're proceeding at your own risk, and that is the chance you're taking. And there is an appeal process, and you can follow that. Does anyone else want to speak on this one or respond?
I'm trying to make a motion to deny the appeal.
Do you do it in the positive?
We typically
do it in the positive.
Uphold the building commissioner's
To
decision.
uphold the building commissioner's issuance of the building permit.
Is that your motion?
Yeah.
Oh, second.
Okay, so let's do Ed, Lisa, myself, Kieran, and Jeff.
Sure.
Okay.
So just to be clear, we're voting, the affirmative is to uphold
the building commissioner's decision.
That's right.
Yes.
So
Issue the permit.
I had a question, but I'll wait till you vote.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So all but Mark.
And Jim. I just did.
So typically the applicant drafts the decision. I suspect Mr. Bailey is not going to do that. I just wanted to find out if town council or staff would be drafting this opinion, or if I, as the appellant, should be, or as the property owner, should be concerned about it. Owner? Okay. Yeah, I am well aware. I just wanted to make sure that as Eleanor is aware, appeals have not been drafted and filed in other cases because of a denial, and you end up with constructive grants and all kinds of nightmares. Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
We'll take a break.
Okay.
Wake up. Wake up.
Michael?
Yes, sir.
Have the crowd showed up?
Yeah, but they're not like they should be yet.
Really? Still too early? Or do you think it might be a
I think they have ups and down years. Just like me.
They're getting the raw sewage from last year.
They don't get affected. Other like oysters don't really.
Oysters down there?
Dirtier the water, the better they do.
Oysters go to 170. 172.
We just got.
Jeff, is he coming back? We were saying take a break, but I can continue without him.
not sitting on it.
I know, Jeff.
Ed, he's still barking at everybody like he's.
Have to get some size to the chair.
Ooh, I think I felt a knot right there. So I guess we can go. We can start without Jeff. We don't. Well, now we don't have Mark, so now we have bed. Sorry, I let the reins go and they all ran away. It's like babysitting.
But they do rush it.
I shouldn't either, but I'm hungry. Sure. Here.
Give me a small one, give me a small one.
I was gonna have a Cliff Bar, but it was like 45 carbohydrates or something.
Without shoes, you got frostbite.
And, you know, my spiel on native species, they're also like, they don't do anything for nature. Like, to serve, they're like statues, they're not doing anything for this environment.
When they plant stuff, they plant 4 birds and bees, because that's getting wiped out.
Right, that's why I.
Okay, so Lisa's not sitting. Should we wait for Ed?
I think it's on strike. So.
I don't object to doing this.
Here he comes. Here he comes. She was going to collect you.
Yeah, it totally is.
Okay, so 22-19, 4 Shakmo Road, Richard Glidden trustee, 4 Shakmo Road trustee, 4 Shakmo Road Realty Trust.
Thank you. For the record, Richard Glidden, my client who owns 6 Shakamo, bought the house next door, and it's 30 or 40 years old, and he wants to fix it up. It's the situation of all these lots out in Shakamo that it used to be 1 acre zoning, and then there was a provision in the bylaw that in 2000, everything magically that was 1 acre became 3 acre. So he went from a conforming lot to a non-conforming lot. It has, he's now only allowed under the zoning, under the LUG 3, he would have been allowed 2877, but with the change, he's got 2110, but he's with the 3%, he's only, which is 5.13, he's well over the ground cover. So with the garage and the building, his total ground cover, as you see on Gasparo's plan, is we're at 2110. He wants to knock down the garage and renovate the house, and at the end of the day, preserve the 2110. That's not go any higher than 2110, which is allowed by special permit. It's not a variance. It's a provision that was contemplated by the bylaw. And again, when the garage is half in the front yard setback, the garage is going to be gone, and the little portions of the building that violate the setback. But any additions, you know, in the layout of the house will conform with setbacks. So at the end of the day, we'll have the same, no more than 2,110 square feet, and anything newly constructed will conform with setbacks. So it seems like a reasonable case for a special permit.
Richard, so you're not removing the building?
No, we're not removing the. I don't know. We may be removing. They haven't figured out the plans yet. They haven't. We're removing the garage.
Right, now I got that.
All right, but they're in the process of designing and going to the HCC to figure out what exactly is going to happen. But at the end of the day, the total ground cover will be exactly no more than what it is today, and any additions or changes will meet setbacks. So, you know, it seems, like I said,
Art's plan still shows a
Yeah.
portion of the proposed renovation in the setback.
well, then
That's the
again, that's, you know, he threw something together to get us to the, to get before the board, but with the understanding that we, you know, we haven't been to the HDC, and the owner and the designer haven't figured out the final design and layout, but the application and, you know, I don't think I want to ask for variance to allow us to build anything, to build anything new within the setbacks.
It looks like more would be demolished of this building to be able to comply with the setbacks. I mean, what would be left at the end of the day?
Well, yeah, I think the rub is the 139.33A4 states that you can do this, remove and reconstruct if C, all reconstructed structures, portions thereof shall conform in all applicable front, rear, side yard setback requirements, unless relief is granted under separate provisions of this chapter. So I guess we can also, I mean, I think we've done this in the past many times, but it's usually we're gonna make it all better,
Yeah.
and keep our ground covered. Otherwise, you have to do the sort of the goofy thought of keeping
One wall.
One wall.
Yeah, I have no issue with them demolishing the entire thing and starting from scratch if that's what they want to do, as long as it's conforming.
I certainly have no
Yeah,
issue
why?
with that.
It's a redistribution of square footage,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, all we're asking is for, to be allowed to have at the end of the day, have a
But
structure with
that's
21.
That's not really what is
The plan
presented
does
by
not represent
Art's
that.
plan.
No.
No.
But I think the addendum,
Did you say heart or art?
Art.
Art, okay, I got you. I thought I was looking at the wrong plan.
Chip's plan. Who's back? He's back. I mean, I would make a motion to grant the relief as requested, as long as
yeah, I mean, it says in the,
it meets the, all other requirements, setback
It
requirements.
looks to me like they haven't shown us full use of the 240 feet that they're gonna be using from the garage to the house. But as long as the setbacks aren't encroached on,
Right.
right,
I don't think we have any problem, do we?
no, I mean, what he's
I don't
asking,
think we even needed an exhibit of a plan for this, just the language in the addendum. It's gonna be in compliance with zoning, and shall be no more ground cover than 2,100 square feet.
Yeah.
right, because there's nothing, there's no non-compliance that we need to,
Right.
Are you comfortable with that, Dick, or do you
The-
think your
yeah.
your client might
2,100
want
on
to
the
keep
I know, he's asking for one.
the some portion of the footprint? Do you think it makes more sense to, having heard from the board that we're all okay with it, that maybe you want the real plan in hand? From a design standpoint?
Well, my understanding is that what exists that's in the setback, the little portion in the front and the little portion on the side. When we get that, at the end of the day, that can be maintained, but any additions or any additions or extra ground cover have to be compliant.
oh, well, that's
It's
different.
kind of different then.
That's different than what you
But
asked
it's
for.
still something that we approved,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I think don't we ask usually for more,
It would have to be crafted differently. and we'd have
more-
to have
More
drawings.
info.
but more info than,
Because, yes,
because then you're keeping a non-conformity, so what if it was,
if it became very apparent, Michael, in the plans that were submitted to us that they were ripping this down,
Okay.
and there was no compelling reason to keep these, I don't know why you wouldn't want to get out of the sideline set, and why you wouldn't want to be conforming anyway. But if it sounds unclear, Dick, that as to whether or not they really want to keep that nonconformity or not.
Well, but if they maintain the nonconformity and any additions are conforming, well, why is that an issue?
Well, I
We're not gonna
the
increase-
issue is if you rip it down to the ground.
Oh, no, I no, clear,
expect you to-
oh, and then we'll put it back in the, no, I understand, no, I think, my understanding is that if in fact the non-conforming, the existing non-conforming, any section of the building that's existing non-conforming is demolished or destroyed, you can't put the new stuff back in non-conforming. You could only maintain the non-conformity if that portion of the structure was maintained.
But that doesn't look, is that what's happening here?
Well, that's, again, the sketch is.
Well, that's all this is.
The
It's a
proposed
sketch.
addition isn't big enough to complete the 240 feet of addition. That's the only thing that,
Well, unless they're counting the screen porch
Yeah,
on
maybe-
it as
or-
not, and not counting
Exactly.
before.
yep.
But I can't tell.
All I think we're saying is that this is just a sketch, so we really don't know.
Well, do we
Yeah.
care if the 240 feet go on the existing building if it doesn't get raised? And what's currently in the setback stays, and there's no further expansion in the setback?
Look, I
But don't we
don't
like to see?
No, we've done that before.
Yeah, oh yeah.
fundamentally care, but I do think if you're going to keep it, if you're going to the trouble and expense of keeping it, that's one thing. If you're tearing it down, I do think.
Well, no, I agree. If it's torn down, absolutely, the new structure has to meet, it can't be, we're only preserving the setback violations if we preserve that portion of the structure that's in the setback violation. I don't, but clearly, if we knock it down and we build a new house, the whole 2,110 square feet has to be out of the setback. I don't think, that's not an issue. That's what you're saying, Michael, right? I think.
Yeah, except I'd like to, of course, mention that you'd be offering this, if you're tearing it down, you'd be offering it to the community for low-income housing.
Oh, that's part of I think that's a requirement these days, but.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think portions of the house are decent and they're trying to.
It says renovation. It doesn't say demolition or raising. It says renovation.
Well, it says remove and reconstruct any or all of the pre-existing non-conforming structures
Oh, it does?
on the page 174 in the addendum,
Well.
right? Seeks a special permit to remove and reconstruct any or all of the pre-existing non-conforming structures or any portion thereof in excess of the permitted ground cover ratio upon the locus.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily what the.
Well, it's non-conforming because it's over the ground cover. I mean.
I guess it would be nice to, ideally we would know what we were looking at. And
Yeah, I just think it's a little bit early and.
I mean, we can walk away and continue this and basically say, we'll bless the combination of the ground cover, the removal of the garage, and basically sanction 2,100 square feet or 2,110.
Show us more detail.
Show us more detail, so that they can go forward and prepare their plans and come up with a COA or whatever we feel comfortable. Maybe they're already there, maybe they're close. I have no issue with.
Yeah, I think,
Finding the ground.
I think that would be acceptable. I think the issue was, we didn't want to go to the HCC and go design a house and get 2110 and then come back here and have the board say, no, we're not going to give you the special permit. You're stuck with 1,500, and then we're in a box and we wasted all this time and effort. But I think the designer is capable of, an owner capable of finalizing the design and getting an HCC approval.
Why don't we continue? Does anyone else want to speak about this one? No.
Well, you know,
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Gooden was hard pressed to get, through no fault of his own, to get me this application. It was delivered well after the deadlines that we worked together, but there was no plan at the time. So he had limited information in terms of the setback issue. So I had to put my legal ad in. The application was a week late, and I'm not blaming him. It was a situation that was out of his control. The plan was submitted to me days later after the legal ad went in, and I saw that some of the red lines were in the setback, but that hadn't been requested. So you can request separate and additional, you know, under 13933A, alteration of a structure that's pre-existing non-conforming to setback, but not creating any new setback.
Yes.
So I think if we're gonna do this, I'm gonna renotice it.
Okay.
Same, but just add that bit.
Yeah.
So that we cover that base in the event that they wanna retain
I think that
for
makes
historic
sense.
purposes or whatever it
Yeah.
is. Is it pre-72, the structure?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe well pre-72, I'm not sure.
Looks like they want to maintain some of it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so,
All right, so I'll make a motion to continue to September, what, 9th, is it?
12.
12.
12.
I'm gonna,
Are you here?
I'm not.
I think I'm,
Are you away?
No.
Which is matter. Okay. Is anyone, you made the motion, Ed?
Yep.
Does anyone want to second the motion? Okay. So, Michael seconded, so Jim, you want to vote this time?
Sure.
I'm out.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that'll be from Ed just down to Jim. Okay? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Will you get HPC stuff?
Pardon me?
Did you have HPC stuff?
Oh, absolutely.
So to move to other business, do I need to do anything? Besides say we're moving to other business? Okay. So, we're gonna move on to, oh, does Lisa wanna come back in now? Yeah, probably. So this is 51-03 Rugged Scott, aka Beach Plum 40B, and Tucker Holland is presenting.
Howdy, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here as a citizen. I'm not sure exactly how these things go. My wife and children and I just bought a home last year on Sakenau Place, which we're enjoying very much. It's a great year-round neighborhood, and as well, there are a number of year-round residents across the way in Beach Plum Village. And it was brought to my attention a couple months ago by someone who purchased a property on Rugged Road that there was a provision as part of the permitting process for Beach Plum Village. My understanding is as some sort of community amenity type of thing for residents within certain proximity of Beach Plum Village to be offered the opportunity for effectively a membership in the common amenities, the pool and tennis court and so forth at Beach Plum Village. And I hadn't known anything about it when we purchased the home. I reached out to some of our new neighbors on Sakenau. They were surprised to learn of this provision. It didn't seem that it was widely known. And so I had reached out to some friends we know who live in Beach Plum Village year-round to find out about who's on the homeowners association and so forth. We understood that this was kind of a responsibility of the homeowners association, and quickly got basically directed to the developer, who my understanding is still retains control over the homeowners association. So, we simply wanted to find out what are the provisions of this program. It was clearly part of the permit as issued, I believe, over 13 years ago. And so it just seems like something like this, they ought to have thought about and implemented by this time.
Okay. So,
Welcome, madam.
You're keeping
yeah,
Lisa awake.
so Marianne hiding back there, do you wanna, that's you back there, right? You're not gonna speak about the developer's position? What? Okay. All right, so.
Did anyone sitting here sit on Rugged Scott?
No.
I didn't.
I didn't sit on it. I think, no.
No.
When was
Yeah.
it?
13 years
Oh,
ago.
no.
13 years, yeah.
We've done some minor revisions to it.
You were on the board,
You
weren't
weren't
you?
on it,
Born.
Michael?
I didn't sit on that one, no.
I didn't
Which
sit on it
Edward was-
either.
Edward Sanford was the chair for that.
Tucker,
So I
what?
do remember we talked about this, though. Sorry to cut you off, but we did talk about this,
all right.
and we talked about it in relation to Surfside Crossing. So it was part of our conversation. I wasn't surprised when this came up to hear that it was a part, but I was surprised that it had never been exercised, because I thought that there was either a complaint or an issue about the Rugged Scott maybe selling memberships, and that's how I became aware of this provision. But I thought that was am I the only one remembering that?
No, that was conversation that took place.
Okay. So I was under the impression that this was already well underway and happening for neighbors, and that it was a concession that was given the same way as some of the buffer zone and maintenance and stuff was given to appease neighbors. But
Well,
it appears neighbors didn't even know that this was in here.
Well, I'm going to back up a second. So, we eventually, I had gotten connected in trying to find out how the who is on the homeowners association board over there, and ultimately connected to the developer. The developer, as you can see in the correspondence, I think that was part of the submittal, basically wrote back and said, well, we haven't put this in place yet. Like, we're going to get to it like at a July meeting. And then there was no July meeting. So my understanding from their representation is that this program has not been formed yet. So I don't know that if memberships, if you will, have been offered, that runs counter to everything that we have been told and understand. And, there's several other Sakenau residents who are listed and signatories to the letter who are, interested again to simply find out what the details are of this.
Well, I don't think we had many details other than what you've presented. I think,
Well, I think the question is when this was supposed to take place. I mean, the developer clearly agreed to it, and you guys have the right to, I don't even know how the mechanism would work. I mean, there's no fee structure or anything like that, but.
Does the developer still have 100% control of the homeowners
Well,
association?
He says he does.
That's what he's representing.
Okay.
But regardless whether whether he has 100% of these people still have the right to enter into some sort of agreement to use that pool. I mean, on those
Yeah, it's too bad
facilities.
there wasn't a little bit more specifics in there.
It would have been nice had it been more specific, right?
There's no Exhibit D, is there a list? Is Exhibit D, right?
Yeah, Exhibit D should be right there, yep.
This is not, this is a terrible exhibit.
Yeah, it doesn't show us, does every lot
223?
on that plan have access?
Well, I think it's just this area right here,
I think there's a dark line around
think it's
the
just
intended,
but they're not even,
Yeah.
but they're not even delineated here as
What
lots.
page is that?
223.
Yeah, it's the dark line. Tucker, did you encounter reluctance from the developer, or was it simply we haven't focused on that yet?
Looks like it, doesn't it?
I mean, that's kind of a, trying to get inside their head, but I would say, looking at the correspondence, that yes, there's kind of a reluctance. I had, as I mentioned, had several conversations with some of the year-round residents who live in Beach Plum Village, who, at least the folks I spoke to, I think would welcome the additional membership, that I think not only for social camaraderie reasons, but I think, in part, the theory would be a few more people who are members defrays part of the cost of, operating the facilities there. So, but I had also reached out to a seasonal owner, and I can only, relay what was shared in the conversation, but it did appear from that conversation that there were seasonal owners in Beach Plum who were not aware of this provision of the permit, and I think it kind of came as new news to them. You can see in some of the correspondence from the developer that, like, wow, this is going to be a big topic of discussion this summer. But I kind of, I think, as we pointed out in the letter, it might be one thing if this was year 1 or year 2 or year 3 or year 4 or year 5, and they hadn't perhaps built the common amenities at that point. But I mean, not only has the pool been built, it's been rebuilt. And so in 13 years, it just feels like that ought to be enough time to figure this out.
Yeah, unfortunately, it would have been and I'm not commenting about you or your group. It would have been great when they came in for the rebuild, because then we could have probably focused on it, which we didn't.
I don't know when that was. I mean, I only recently.
It was within recent memory.
Was it even noticed?
The rebuild of the pool?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my view on this is, it's pretty clear.
I know, but what?
And this is a record, this is the point of it. I don't know why we really need to interpret it, and that, nor, if a property owner isn't aware of this, that's not really an excuse. You can't change rules. What's the issue?
Well, they could, I think the issue is that nobody's doing anything about
How do
it.
we force the developer to deal with it?
I think that clearly the developer has written something in the rules and regulations regarding his stake in the homeowners association and how long he's in charge of it.
But he's still
So
subject
how does
to
that
the
negate
permit.
his
It
obligation
doesn't.
to
It doesn't.
Execute.
Absolutely doesn't.
He's in limbo.
So I mean, I would think that we write the developer a letter and ask him to come to the next meeting and explain what he has in mind for the.
But I don't want him
for
just
the
to
land.
explain it. I would like to see I want to see this fee structure that he's supposed, right? Because it has to be it says there has to be a fee structure. I wouldn't want to push it out. I'd want to have him present that there.
I think we should take it one step further and give that letter to the building, the CEO, and say, listen, this is still an outstanding issue. I know that there's some buildings that supposedly aren't CO'd by now.
He said something about 7 more to go.
According to the developer, he has 7 market rate. This was as of a month or 2 ago, but 7 market rate units left to sell.
But they're built.
I believe they're built.
Well, supposedly 3 of them were, because this came up with the developer a while ago about some other condition that wasn't being met. And so we put a letter in the file saying that I believe the last 3 lots should not receive a CO until whatever matter was cleared up. I can't remember what it was specifically. I mean, quite frankly, we should never release the lots until we bent over backwards, and I'm not going to take that any further, but we shouldn't, we should try to put some teeth into this somehow.
I agree. So Susan, that's another letter you have to write.
Yeah. No, that's one
I'm
letter.
not very good at letter writing.
No, one letter that.
Secretary.
There isn't one.
Right back to you, Ed.
Oh,
It's cold.
Here you go. You're welcome.
But
Actually, I think member 2 would be a good one.
No.
He looks like one.
No. I'm thinking Eleanor would write the letter.
Okay.
If we can offer letter writing assistance.
Absolutely. No, I just think we need to make the CEO aware that there are issues, and we just want to get it cleared up. And I think Susan's idea, if Josh will come and maybe shed some light on this, maybe it's not a big issue. Maybe he
You haven't
forgot.
heard anything about the financials and the membership fees or anything there's been noticed?
No, but I mean, I guess we just presume, there are at least 33 homeowners over there now. I'm sure they have a dues structure. It isn't complicated to figure out how to extend that to a few more folks. I think the permit calls for
You wouldn't be responsible for paying full dues share. because
No,
you're not
just your
partaking in-
prorated.
I think it kind of alludes to being, the fee should be commensurate to the amenities that you are having access to. But I'm sorry, lost my train of thought there. But anyway, I don't think it's like that complicated, and it could be the case that when the details are presented, there are 5 of us at least who would like to be part of the group that reviews what is proposed and so forth. But, some folks may say, thank you for the opportunity and I'm not interested. But at this point, we just simply want to understand what the offer is.
Logical.
Of course. It's a progressive movement.
Aren't they required to have at least one association meeting per year?
They are, and I believe it was we didn't hear exactly when it was from the developer, but we did learn from the residents that it was scheduled for early July, then it was pushed to late August, which I don't know the exact date of it.
Well,
maybe their representative would know.
I guess I'm curious, if it's late August, it's right around the corner. Why can't you get involved?
But he's
not an old homeowner.
He's not a homeowner.
He's not a homeowner, but he's one of the people in the designated area that can join this club.
So it's,
Well-
you can go to the meeting?
I mean, it says well, that's not what it really.
I don't think that
It
we
says-
would be entitled to attend that meeting.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, have a letter addressing the situation that's available to be heard at the meeting.
The developer is keenly aware that we're interested, and that's produced not much so far. So
Well, when did you start this conversation?
April, maybe.
Yeah, I believe Josh was
Yeah,
ill
pretty ill.
at one point, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in the hospital, it said.
So
Okay.
he's got to come some slack there. So
We do, but I think the 13 years.
you're going back 13.
He was out of commission for 5 years at least.
Well, he seems to be able to be following up on some other things going on around here. So it just seems like this is a relatively small
it's
item.
a good point, the 13 years, although, it could very well be that nobody's ever expressed interest and it fell through the cracks for him too. So I think through Susan, we initiate conversation.
Yeah, and it's 10 to 30 non-resident families, and the association has discretion there of how many they wish to issue, so,
It's a minimum of 10.
Minimum.
so I'm saying, it's a minimum of 10, but a maximum of 30, so if, the people, all these lots shown on, Exhibit D, which is not very clearly marked, but I think it's,
Well, there's also another neighborhood. Looks like it goes all the way down towards
I
Fairgrounds Road.
know, it's not a very good exhibit.
I know, I started to highlight, I'm not sure if it's on the other side of the fairgrounds.
I know, but that doesn't seem to make sense. Why would it be people
So
over there?
it's a lottery then.
Well, who knows? There may not be this overwhelming
Right,
demand.
I mean, there is no, this, it seems like this is the only reference to it, so it doesn't say that it's a lottery. It could be however they they could decide however they could be the first 10 people, or, I don't know, who knows, however they decide to do it. But what was I just looking at? All right, so we can reach out to Josh and,
I don't think it goes over Fairgrounds Road. I think that's a street, like a highlight from the Jeep.
yeah, it's just weird.
I think it's
Clearly a
one lot.
T-shape.
No,
Yeah.
it goes over. These
Well,
4
what-
lots
what-
on
what's
Fairgrounds
this?
would be part of
That's-
it.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
just
just
the
saying it's
road.
not this, though. It's
No,
not
no.
Oh, you're right, I think you're
Yeah,
right.
it's
That's
just
just, that
this
designates a road. So
thing,
this looks
yeah.
to be the
Right.
shape of it.
And this, because this is the development here.
I think you're right, that just shows a road.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear.
So that'd be crazy. So, okay, so why don't we
Send them a note.
reach out to Josh and see where he's at with this?
Okay, so
And we want him to come in and,
under other business,
under other business.
right,
Or his representative.
Or his rep.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be him.
so would you like me to draft a letter for you to sign that can be scanned and emailed to him?
Sure.
I actually want Ed to do it.
I did want Ed to do it.
You'll be waiting a long
I would
time.
probably.
I'd like Ed
They
to
won't
write
be
it,
swimming in that
Eleanor to
pool.
review it.
Yeah, I mean, I one of the things I would want to know is, does he have the fee structure, or do we even care about the fee structure? It has to be comparable. It doesn't really matter to us what it is. That's up to them to figure out. But I'd probably want a better list rather than this Exhibit D of what the lots are that are eligible, just because I feel like that this is confusing already for you guys even, so it would be helpful to see a list of the lots, maybe?
Yeah.
Well, and if I could, I think something in there that says, and by when will you have determined and be implementing this program? I mean, that's really the
Because
issue here.
the amenities are available year-round, like the gym, right, there's a gym over there or whatever.
Yeah, we just want to start the conversation.
Playground as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to make a
Motion
motion?
to adjourn?
We don't need to vote on this particular issue, do we, Susan?
Yeah, it just says to the facility, so I guess it includes
Tennis court, lawn.
the clubhouse, pool, lawn, tennis court facility. It's not really, whatever. Okay. So, any other business, anything else?
Just quickly before you leave, I know Mark will not be here just looking ahead, Mark has told me he will be absent in September. I believe you and Lisa are going in October
Yeah.
for that meeting date.
Yeah.
Anybody know?
What is the date in October?
10th, I think.
10th?
Is that the Thursday before Columbus Day?
No, it is,
Yeah.
14. No, sorry. Oh, wait, I'm looking wrong.
Yeah, it's the 10th.
Yeah, that's Thursday before.
The 10th,
Yeah.
correct. So anybody else going in October? Okay.
Tucker, we're finished with this
Yeah, Tucker,
issue,
you're all
right?
set. Thank you
No,
so
no,
much.
thank you. So when will you be inviting him to come?
Well, I think the letter is going to open up conversation, and then we're going to take it from there, yes?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because,
I think Eleanor will know whether he's gonna show up or his representative's gonna show up at the next meeting.
Okay, and that's in September?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Frankly,
okay.
I mean, I don't know if he'll be able to,
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll be able to see, if he'll be able to be here for September, but. Yeah, Marianne, but I mean, just have.
Well, quote unquote, as soon as possible, we'd like to talk to you about it. And, you know, we can't
Okay,
force it.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so motion to
And it
adjourn.
was second.
Hold on, I had a question.
Oh, God, Ed, you know?
I really miss it. No, didn't we get an email about George coming at one point?
No, that's September.
George preaching?
Yeah.
About
My bad.
It'll be an executive session.
Surfside Crossing stuff.
Everything.
Sweet God, Ed's still in France.
Okay, so motion to adjourn was made, seconded?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.